from level 1 to 100, hidden laws of reality that shouldn't work to fall asleep to. What if gravity didn't pull things down, but persuaded them to fall? What if your thoughts didn't just interpret the world, but shaped its fabric? You've heard of the laws of physics, the ones that seem to make sense, but hidden beneath them, in the quiet folds of existence, are rules that whisper instead of shout, laws that shouldn't work, and yet, mysteriously, do. Maybe reality isn't built like a machine, but woven like a dream, looping, recursive, full of seams that vanish when stared at too hard. In this journey, we won't just explore theories. We'll drift through them, like breath through silk. Each level we rise through won't give answers, only deeper invitations. So, wherever you are, on your bed, your couch, or inside your own swirling thoughts, breathe. Let go of the day, and let's begin the climb. From the bottom of what you thought was real, toward the softest paradoxes of what might be. The door you already opened. You didn't just click play. You arrived quietly, as if something had already nudged you forward before your hand even moved. And now, here you are. Not in front of a screen, not really, but just behind the curtain of your thoughts. A breath past logic. A blink beyond what you usually call real. That sound in the background? That's not music. That's the room adjusting to your presence. The way reality creaks a little when you notice it noticing you. It's strange, isn't it? One moment you're scrolling. The next, you're sinking. As if something gently caught your awareness mid-air and whispered, "Stay here a moment longer." And here's the first question we'll wrap ourselves around tonight. How do you trust a thought when it's the thought that's asking? A woman at the train station once said to me, "Isn't it odd how sometimes I feel like my brain is trying to trick me into thinking it's being honest?" Her words weren't poetic, just practical. She said it while tying her shoe. But it stayed with me, because maybe that's what happens when we pause. We hear the floor creak under our certainties. You see, the mind isn't a mirror. It's more like a hallway of funhouse glass, warping, stretching, laughing quietly at its own distortions. Sometimes it shows you something true. Sometimes it shows you what you need. And sometimes it echoes back the question with a different voice entirely. Did I really say that? Or did I just think I did? Was that memory mine? Or did I borrow it from a dream? There was a barista once, handing me a drink that wasn't mine. She looked up, smiled, and said, "I just gave it to you because you looked like someone who needed it." I took it, even though I didn't order it, and it was perfect. Not because it was what I wanted, but because it reminded me that intention and outcome don't always have to line up. That's what this space is. A place where the lines don't need to match to make sense, where you can start doubting your own questions and feel strangely safe doing it. This isn't just a video. It's a simulation of attention. And right now, your awareness is looping back on itself. Not lost, but folded, bent gently inward. You're not unraveling. You're just reweaving. And if some part of you is resisting sleep, let it. We're not forcing rest. We're letting the story sink below the threshold of effort. The illusion of control softens. The puzzle becomes a pattern. You're no longer thinking the thought. The thought is thinking you. Let's go deeper. Not into confusion, but into that soft, rhythmic layer underneath it all, where sense stops needing proof and silence becomes a guide. The door is already open. Let's keep walking. The paradox of free will. You clicked this video, intentionally it seemed. Maybe your hand hovered for a second. Maybe your eyes scanned the title twice. But pause for a moment. Did you truly decide to press play? Or was that act already written into the script of your life, the final domino in a chain set toppling long before you ever opened your browser? The idea of free will is seductive. It comforts us. We believe in it with the same certainty we believe in gravity or the color blue. You wake up and decide to wear red instead of gray. You decide to skip breakfast or eat a banana. You choose, you act. You move through life like a conductor leading an orchestra. But what if you're not the conductor at all? What if you're the music being played? Let's step back. We believe we have agency. You may say, I chose to be kind today, or I'm changing careers because I want something different. But behind every I want lies an intricate latticework of prior events, chemical impulses, social pressures, childhood memories, cultural norms, and inherited DNA. Before you could even speak, choices were being made for you. The language you think in, not your choice. The beliefs that feel natural, planted in you long ago. The reactions you have to pain, joy, shame, or praise, often conditioned before you even knew what those feelings meant. Let's go deeper. Consider this. The thought you're having right now, reading these words, did you choose it? Or did it arise in your mind like a spark from a fire you didn't light? Every idea, every emotion, every urge. How many of them came uninvited? How many bubbled up from a place below consciousness, then simply presented themselves, pretending they were yours? This is the whisper of determinism, the quiet, unsettling suggestion that every action, every decision, every word you utter is the result of a cascade of prior causes. If you rewound time, rewound every moment down to the subatomic spin of every particle, would you still make that same choice? If the entire universe began again under the same conditions, would anything be different? A marble rolling down a hill, bouncing off stones, curving through soil until it lands at your feet. You wouldn't say the marble chose its path. You'd say it followed it. So then, what makes you different? The brain, this tangled web of neurons and memories and hormones, follows patterns. Inputs create outputs. Triggers cause responses. You see a threat, and your heart races. You hear a song, and nostalgia stirs. You read these words, and perhaps something shifts inside you. But were you the one who caused the shift, or merely the witness to it? The paradox tightens its grip here. We feel free. We feel like we're choosing. Yet we are shaped by forces we did not design, parents we didn't pick, nations we didn't select, traumas we didn't ask for, habits we didn't see forming. We feel like authors, but might we just be characters? Self-aware, yes, but not sovereign. Even your sense of self, that I you carry around, may be less a singular identity and more a collection of moments, a narrative stitched together by memory. Neuroscience shows that decisions often arise in the brain before we're consciously aware of them. You move your hand, then feel like you decided to. But what if the decision had already been made, and consciousness just caught up after the fact? This leads us to the uncomfortable possibility that you, the decision maker, the thinker, the chooser, might be an illusion. Not in the sense that you don't exist, but that your experience of control is more like a theater. Convincing, moving, beautifully designed, but ultimately scripted. And yet, does that mean we're powerless? Not necessarily. There's a strange beauty here. If everything is determined, then so is your empathy, your kindness, your awe. The poem that moved you, the stranger you helped, the boundary you overcame, all were part of a choreography written by everything that came before. And if free will is an illusion, it is one that allows for meaning. The illusion of choice may still give rise to responsibility. Even if we are not the creators of our paths, we are still the ones walking them. This realization can be freeing. If every thought is a ripple from something before it, then perhaps guilt, shame, and blame lose some of their weight. You were shaped, not broken. Others too. Maybe forgiveness becomes easier, not because harm didn't occur, but because the one who caused it might not have truly been choosing either. And yet again, the paradox deepens. If we fully embrace determinism, what happens to morality? If no one truly chooses, can we still hold people accountable? Or must we shift from punishment to prevention, from retribution to understanding? These are not easy questions. They shake the foundations of justice, of ethics, of how we treat each other. The universe that shouldn't exist. There's something quietly absurd about the fact that you're even listening to this right now, that your ears work, that sound waves ripple through air at the right temperature, that your brain, an electric sponge of memories and questions, can interpret meaning from these gentle vibrations. It should all be nothing, blank, silent, and yet, here you are. The strange thing is, the universe doesn't seem obligated to exist. Physics permits many things, but it doesn't demand this particular story. If gravity had been ever so slightly stronger, stars would collapse too quickly for life to form. If the strong nuclear force had been just a whisper weaker, atoms would never hold together. What you're hearing now, what you're being now, rides on constants so precise it makes the word unlikely feel lazy. This is known as the fine-tuning problem. Scientists chart the odds, run simulations, and scratch their heads. Philosophers write books, give it names: anthropic principle, divine providence, multiverse lottery. But really, it feels more like walking into a vast, empty theater and finding the spotlight already on, perfectly angled toward your seat. A man once told me this on a train, somewhere between cities too gray to remember. He sipped cheap coffee, looked out the window, and said, "Doesn't it strike you as strange that anything is happening at all?" I laughed then. But now, years later, I still hear his voice when I look at the stars, or when I close my eyes and feel my own pulse, a rhythm that could have so easily not been written. Someone holds open the door to a cafe and says, "You're just in time." It feels casual, even forgettable, but under it lies something cosmic. What if timing itself is a miracle? The universe did not have to be intelligible, or stable, or warm, or poetic. And yet the laws that govern it seem to conspire not just to allow existence, but to shape it in ways that allow music and questions and longing. So maybe we're not the center of the universe, but we are its witnesses. And that matters. Pause for a moment, not to understand, just to feel. You lying here in the quiet are part of something more delicate than it lets on. A breath too far in any direction, and the whole equation collapses. But it didn't. It held. And now you are suspended in this improbable symmetry, a single thought curled inside a sleeping cosmos. Two people pass each other in a hallway. One says, "Do you know which room has the softest chairs?" The other replies, "It's not the softness. It's how you sit in them." And then they laugh like old friends, even if they've never met. Sometimes the most ordinary questions carry the weight of a universe that shouldn't exist. So what does that mean for you? maybe nothing, maybe everything. You're not required to solve it tonight. You're only invited to wonder. And as your mind settles into the stillness beneath the asking, you might feel that the answer was never the point. Let go of the need to define. Let your thoughts drift like dust through starlight. Because next, we'll unravel how even the act of observing can reshape reality itself. Take a slow breath. You're floating in a cosmic accident or a masterpiece, and either way, you're here. Observer effect. You change what you watch. What if the universe could feel you watching it? That gentle act, the blink, the glance, the curious tilt of your head. What if that changed something fundamental about reality itself? It sounds like a strange bedtime fable whispered between physicists and dreamers. But in the quantum world, this is not only a story, it's a law. In the quiet silence of a lab, with equipment humming faintly and lasers tracing invisible lines through space, something astonishing happens. A photon, the tiniest bundle of light, behaves like a ripple, an undulating, ghostly probability wave. It could be here, it could be there, it might go left, it might go right. That's the nature of quantum uncertainty. But the moment you look, really look, it chooses. Suddenly, the wave vanishes, and the photon becomes a single, solid dot, a fixed point in the universe, just because you measured it. This phenomenon is called the observer effect. In essence, the very act of observation collapses all the endless possibilities into one single outcome. It's as if the universe was keeping its options open until you showed up, until you cared enough to ask, "Where is it?" And now, with eyelids softening under the weight of wonder, ask yourself, what does that mean about you? Are you a passive bystander? A tiny speck drifting through a world of cause and effect? Or are you something much more, an active ingredient in the recipe of reality? Maybe consciousness isn't just something floating in the universe, but something that helps form it. Maybe you, lying here in the still of the night, are co-authoring the very script of what happens next. Two voices whisper in the dark. But how can simply observing something change it? Because when you look, you're not neutral. Your attention has weight. But I didn't touch the photon. I didn't interfere. Looking is interference. You cannot look without leaving fingerprints. There is something poetic and terrifying in that. Imagine every moment you've stared at the stars, every time you've looked at someone with love or suspicion, or turned your attention to your own thoughts. You believed you were just watching, but the universe may have shifted in response. It brings to mind a strange kind of intimacy, like walking into a room that suddenly straightens its tie, a world that subtly adjusts itself beneath your gaze. Maybe you felt it when someone stares at you from across the room and you somehow know, or when you watch an animal and it suddenly stops and looks right back as if to say, "I felt that." What is it about awareness that makes it so powerful? There is an old parable from the East. A monk sits quietly in meditation, and a visitor asks him what he's doing. "I am observing my breath," the monk replies. "But your breath would happen anyway, whether you watch it or not," says the visitor. "Yes," the monk says, "but when I observe it, I meet it, I become it." Is that the secret? Is attention a kind of union, an invisible handshake between the inner and the outer, between the watcher and the watched? And if that's true, how do we begin to see clearly? Because here lies the paradox. In order to witness reality without distortion, you must first accept that your witnessing creates distortion. You must learn to see with humility, knowing that your gaze is never innocent, never weightless. A man stands before a mirror and wonders who is more real, the reflection or the one looking in. He tilts his head, so does the image. He furrows his brow, the glass follows. But if he stops and walks away, the mirror returns to stillness. What then was the mirror doing before it was being watched? Another voice enters now, soft, almost inaudible beneath the blanket of night. Does this mean nothing is truly objective? Maybe not in the quantum world. Then how do we know anything for certain? We don't. But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the point isn't to know, but to notice. And to notice that you notice. And now, somewhere between waking and dreaming, the idea begins to dissolve into something gentler. You don't need to understand wave function collapse to appreciate the beauty of attention. Just think of how a child blossoms when you truly see them, or how music seems richer when you're fully present, or how love, real love, only exists when you are there, not just in body, but in gaze. Perhaps you are not a separate entity at all, but part of an ancient dance, a waltz between perception and existence, between the seen and the seer. Perhaps the universe doesn't fully bloom until someone stops and says, "Look, and now, look no more." Let your eyes rest gently. Let your thoughts wander like photons before the measurement, unwatched, undefined, free. Because next, we will look into the mirror that remembers and wonders who's on the other side. The mirror that remembers. The light is dim now, not dark, but just enough to soften the edges. You pass by the bathroom mirror without thinking, then stop, look back. There you are, silent, blinking once, then twice. But it feels less like looking at yourself, and more like being looked at by someone who remembers you better than you do. She stands beside the sink, towel on her head, and says, "You ever feel like mirrors hold grudges?" He chuckles, tying the knot in his hoodie. Not grudges. More like gentle reminders. Because that reflection isn't just light bouncing back, it's layers, one on top of the other. A version of you from this morning, last year, that night when you were heartbroken and brushed your teeth just to keep from crying. The mirror saw it all. It didn't flinch. Some physicists believe the past only exists because something remembers it. The grooves in a record, the dents in a car, the dirt under fingernails after planting something that never grew. Memory, they say, is physical. Even time leaves fingerprints. So when you meet your eyes in the mirror, you're not just checking your face. You're reuniting with every past self that stood there too. Not just one reflection, but all of them at once. 1,000 quiet witnesses stacked in the glass. "I saw a photo of me from college today," she murmurs, brushing something from her sleeve. "Let me guess," he says. "You didn't recognize her?" Number I did. That's what scared me. There's something eerie in how mirrors never protest. They never correct you. They just present. And maybe that's why they're sacred. Not because they reflect the truth, but because they remember it, whether you're ready or not. Each time you glance, the moment is recorded. Not in film or paper, but in something older. The way your room remembers your footsteps, the way a pillow holds the shape of your neck. Even silence takes the shape of what you didn't say. Now, your breath slows, the air is still, and in this quiet, even your reflection exhales. You are not who you were, but you are still being held in the memory of what was. The mirror does not forget. So blink softly. Let this moment pass like steam on glass. And next, we'll trace how time itself might not be what it seems. Let your mind stay gentle. You're not alone. You're just arriving. The arrow of time bends backward. We tend to imagine time as an arrow, sharp, unwavering, and moving in only one direction. It begins with birth, marches through each heartbeat, and ends with death. In this view, the past is fixed, the present fleeting, and the future a mystery waiting to be shaped. Cause leads to effect, actions become consequences, and stories unfold page by page. But what if that arrow bends? What if time doesn't move like a river, but sits like a lake, still and silent, until something ripples? In the world of quantum mechanics, our most precise window into reality, strange things begin to happen. In certain experiments, particles appear to behave differently depending on whether they are observed after they have already made a choice. Some even seem to react to measurements that haven't occurred yet, as if the future is whispering back to the present. This eerie effect has a name: retrocausality. It suggests a universe where time isn't strictly linear, where the future can loop backward and tap the shoulder of now. You might be wondering, how can something respond to what hasn't happened? That question alone begins to untangle the threads of everything we thought we understood. Philosophers call it a paradox of causation. Physicists cautiously explore it through experiments like the delayed choice quantum eraser, where the path a particle seems to take now depends on a measurement made later. It's as if time folds in on itself and cause and effect become dance partners instead of a one-way march. What does this mean for us? Soft, breathing human beings trying to make sense of love, loss, and longing. It means that maybe the future isn't just waiting to happen. Maybe it's already shaping us. Maybe hope isn't just a projection forward, but a quiet echo backward. And maybe memory itself is more than the residue of the past. Maybe it's a way our minds predict the future in reverse, like watching shadows stretch ahead of footsteps we haven't yet taken. In such a world, aging becomes not just the accumulation of time, but the layering of meaning across a canvas we can't fully see. Healing may not simply be the mending of old wounds, but the reception of futures where those wounds no longer define us. And hope, then, might not be a wish for what could be, but a resonance with what already is, somewhere just ahead, quietly pulling us toward it. So take a breath. Let go of the tick-tock rhythm of the clock. Drift beyond the idea of yesterday chasing tomorrow. Because next we'll explore something even stranger: the illusion of a singular self. What if you're not just one person? What if you're many, layered, changing, flickering between versions of who you might be, depending on which timeline you choose to notice? The self that isn't one. It begins so simply. A voice in your mind says, "I need to get up earlier tomorrow." And just as gently, another replies, "We've said that before." You smile faintly, maybe even shrug. But who exactly is talking to whom? Inside your quiet skull lives a crowded room, not chaos. No, something softer, like shifting winds inside a cave. There's a part of you that plans, another that resists, one that wants to impress, another that quietly mourns. None of them lie. They're just fragments, layers, selves. Modern neuroscience whispers what ancient meditations already sensed. There is no single self, no CEO behind your eyes, only a bundle of perspectives, a parliament of impulses that learn to live together, mostly. Sometimes they agree, often they negotiate, and in rare, still moments, they dissolve entirely. One evening, a woman paused at a crosswalk. A man beside her said, not unkindly, "You okay?" She laughed gently. "I don't know which one of me wants dinner." It was a joke, but also not. You've felt it too. The quiet shifts in your mood that arrive without warning, as if a different you has taken the wheel. The you that forgives too easily, the one who can't let go, the one who suddenly wants to call someone you swore you'd never miss. Each of them real, each of them temporary. Personality, it turns out, isn't a monument. It's a campfire, kept alive by memory and repetition. A good night's sleep, a sudden heartbreak, a forgotten song on the radio. And the whole thing shifts. You may look the same, but someone else inside you now speaks with your voice. Is that unsettling? Maybe. But there's grace in it too. Because if the self is not solid, then neither is suffering. Pain belongs to a version of you, not all of you. And healing, it doesn't require permission from your past. It just needs one version of you to believe it's possible. A man once sat alone in a library cafe. A child bumped into his table and spilled juice on his book. The child froze. The man said only this: "That's all right. This wasn't the version of me that gets angry." Then he smiled and kept reading. This moment, this very breath, is held by a self that is listening. Not all of you, just enough of you, the part that's ready to hear what comes next. So loosen your grip on I. Let it stretch into something softer, stranger, a gentle we resting under your skin. Because now, we're moving into a thought that's even harder to hold, that you might be living in every version of yourself, all at once, and they're all waiting, just beyond the veil of the next idea. You are in all timelines at once. Somewhere, in a version of tonight that isn't this one, you never clicked this video. Or maybe you did, but paused it halfway. Maybe you're still in the kitchen. Maybe you're outside, watching stars burn silently above your head. And in all of these threads of existence, you remain, each version of you moving forward on its own strange timeline, unknowable, but real. This isn't poetry. It's physics. According to the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, every choice you make, no matter how small, doesn't close off other possibilities. Instead, it branches reality. One version of you said yes, another walked away. In one sliver of the cosmos, you forgave. In another, you did not. There is no single, linear you. You are the sum of all these divergences, a living constellation of paths walked and not walked, griefs endured and joys chosen. Two voices rise in the dark, quiet like the turning of a page. Do you think we ever really make the right choice? One asks. The other is slower to answer. Maybe. There's no single right, just different echoes, and each one matters somewhere. It's comforting, isn't it? To know that no moment is ever final, that the you who stumbled still exists, but so does the version who stood tall, that the one who stayed silent at the crossroads is balanced by another who screamed into the storm. Your regret, it might be soothed by the fact that somewhere else you laughed instead, and that laughter, though distant, still sends ripples through this you, like a warm breeze from an invisible window. This isn't fantasy. It's a shift in how we understand reality. If all versions of you exist, then you are never alone. You're never only this moment, or this sadness, or this hesitation. You are a kaleidoscope of timelines, each shining a different shade. And maybe, just maybe, when you sit still enough, you can feel them humming quietly beneath your skin. So breathe, not to control the moment, but to drift through it, to feel the gentleness of possibility without needing to grasp it. Let the weight of all you could have been rest softly across your shoulders, not a burden, but a blanket. Because next, we let go of particles and choices and step into a mystery even deeper. What if it wasn't the universe that gave rise to life, but life in its awareness that gave rise to the universe? Biocentrism. Life creates the universe. You blink, the room doesn't change. Or does it? Somewhere deep within the fabric of what we call real, a theory whispers, nothing exists until it is seen. Not metaphor, not philosophy, but physics unsettled. Biocentrism, an idea both simple and seismic, says this: life isn't a byproduct of the universe. It's the prerequisite. A canvas doesn't show its colors unless there are eyes to perceive them. And atoms? They wait, suspended between maybes, until a conscious being enters the scene. I think I forgot my umbrella, someone says beside you in the elevator. You glance, a man with silver-rimmed glasses, smiling faintly. You brought the rain with you, you reply. He laughs. Or maybe the rain brought me. Is it absurd to think that the storm only exists because someone witnessed its grayness? That without perception there is no scene at all? Biocentrism dares to make that the starting point. Not atoms, not gravity, but awareness. It doesn't suggest we're dreaming the cosmos. That would be too neat. Instead, it hints that without a conscious reference point, reality has no reason to settle into a coherent shape. No up, no down, no time. Just a cloud of probabilities waiting to be chosen. Someone opens a window and says, "Smells like summer." You breathe in the warmth. The air hums with scent, sun on pavement, distant jasmine. But who exactly gave those molecules meaning? The air was always there. The feeling only came when you noticed it. You are not drifting in the universe like dust in a jar. You are the jar. You are the light looking in. This view doesn't ask you to believe in magic. It just invites you to notice how central you are to the picture, not as ego, but as engine. Perception is not passive. It's the very act of turning maybe into is. And when you look at the night sky, stars that died long ago still shine. They shine now because your eyes exist, because your mind, gentle and quiet, is still wondering. Rest easy. You don't need to solve it. Just know, without you, none of this unfolds. Not the sky, not the wind, not the sound of your own breath curling toward sleep. And as that breath softens, we slip into the next mystery. Not what happens next, but when does anything really happen at all? The infinite now. Close your eyes and listen, not to the ticking of a clock, but to the silence between ticks. That silence is where time becomes strange. You feel it passing, like sand slipping through a fist, yet somehow you're always here, always now. But what if this moment isn't moving at all? What if it's standing still, and you're the one shifting? Time, to us, feels like a river. It flows forward, pulling yesterday into memory and tomorrow into mystery. But in certain corners of physics, that river vanishes. The equations don't demand a direction. They whisper something wilder, that past, present, and future may exist all at once, like pages of a closed book. The story feels like it's unfolding only because you're flipping the pages, but the ending is already there. Imagine a photon, pure light, born in a star traveling across galaxies. To it, time doesn't tick. There is no before and after. From emission to arrival, there is no journey, no waiting, no aging. It lives in a kind of eternal now. And if light can do that, why not consciousness? Do you ever feel like you've lived this moment before? She asked, staring at her coffee, not quite drinking it. Sometimes, he replied, eyes lost somewhere past the window. but not like déjà vu. More like the moment's too complete, too familiar, as if it never really left. And if it didn't? She whispered. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Maybe now isn't the smallest slice of time, it's the whole cake, and we're only tasting one bite at a time. Maybe your childhood, your old age, and your very last breath are all suspended in this timeless lattice, existing together but separated by your attention, like stars you can't see until night. And what then is memory, if not just a spotlight dancing across a frozen field of moments? Perhaps it's not something that happened and passed, but something you're still inside of, just out of view. And death, if everything is always happening, may not be an ending, but a folding, a shift in perception. The next chapter was already written, and you're already reading it elsewhere. So sit with this moment. Let it swell like a tide held still. Notice the space between words, between thoughts. That's where the infinite lives, not in hours or years, but in the depth of presence. The paradox is gentle and beautiful. Now isn't fleeing from you. It's waiting for you to notice it never left. And just as you settle into the stretch of time, as the world slows to a breath, we must ask, if even time bends to mystery, what happens when reason itself reaches its edge? What happens when logic breaks? Gödel's loop, truth that escapes logic. There's a silence that lives between knowing and not knowing, a hush not born of ignorance, but of reverence. Because sometimes, even when we're sure, we're not certain. Even when the math is clean, the answer stays just out of reach. And no matter how carefully we follow reason's thread, it slips. A man once proved that. His name was Gödel. He didn't wear a cape or swing a sword, but what he uncovered cut deeper than logic itself. He showed the world that even the most flawless system of reasoning, the purest, most rigorous mathematics, will contain truths that cannot be proven from within, like a book that can never read its own title. Wait, someone whispers softly in a library cafe, voice half wrapped in steam from their tea. If truth exists but can't be proven, how do we know it's there? A second voice, warm but thoughtful, replies from the next table over. Maybe it's like music you feel in your chest before the notes begin. It's there, you just can't pin it down. Gödel's loop is a strange kind of circle, not the neat kind traced by a compass, but the trembling orbit of a thought that bends back on itself. A snake that tries to eat its own tail, only to discover it has no mouth. Incompleteness, he called it. But it feels more like a mirror that reflects only what stands beside it, not the one who looks into it. This doesn't make logic useless. Quite the opposite. It makes it alive, fragile, capable of humility. Because for all the precision we wrap around reality, rules, proofs, systems, there are truths that sit just beyond the last rule in the book. They shimmer on the edge like heat on pavement. You know they're there, but step closer, and they recede. Someone once said they felt this when they tried to describe love. I know what it is, they said, staring down at their hands. But every time I try to explain it, it escapes. Like trying to bottle wind. Their friend smiled, not to answer, but to echo. Some things, maybe they're true because they can't be explained. And in that moment, it makes sense. That logic has limits, not because it fails, but because reality is larger than language, deeper than deduction. Like a room with one locked drawer you're never meant to open, but always meant to wonder about. So tonight, you don't need to solve it. Let the question hum softly in the background, like a distant violin you don't quite recognize. Let it remind you that mystery doesn't mean confusion. Sometimes it means clarity that can't be caught. Close your eyes if they haven't already. Feel your thoughts slow. Even truth is resting now. Because next, we'll look at how simplicity impossibly gives birth to everything. Emergence, when simplicity births complexity. In the quiet folds of reality, something miraculous happens, not with thunder, but with whispers, a few lines of code, a handful of rules, and yet, from this simplicity, entire worlds bloom. Like a breath rippling across still water, the smallest motions cascade outward, shaping galaxies of meaning from grains of pattern. Consider the ant. It doesn't know it's building a bridge. It simply follows a rule. Follow the scent. And yet together, thousands of them form highways, rafts, whole civilizations. No leader, no architect, just emergence. Or think of neurons. Each one pulses, connects, responds. But together, they dream. They remember birthdays and mourn endings and imagine futures that don't yet exist. The mind isn't a machine. It's a murmuration, a flock of sparks swirling into thought. Two voices whisper in the dark. But how? How can complexity be born from rules so basic? The same way a melody rises from silence, not from force, but from form. Emergence isn't magic. It's more sacred than that. It's the dance of tiny things aligning until something bigger than themselves steps into being. A single drop of water has no intention. But rivers carve canyons. A note has no soul. But music stirs something no single sound could ever reach. Maybe consciousness is not a thing to be owned or placed in a jar. Maybe it's a byproduct, like flame from friction, a harmony that arises when enough pieces hum just right, not imposed from above, but bubbling up from beneath. This thought can comfort. It means we are not machines to be programmed, but patterns, alive, emergent, infinite in variation. It means the world is not built, it's becoming. And you are not a list of ingredients. You are the song they sing together. The self, the soul, the story, they emerge. One pauses. So there doesn't have to be a plan. Maybe not. Maybe the plan is the dance itself. Let that idea settle. The more we look, the more we see the world not as constructed, but as unfolding, like fractals blooming at the edge of perception, like meaning dripping from the simple, again and again. And as you drift deeper into thought or sleep, know this: from emergence, we spiral toward recursion, where the mind, ever curious, begins to loop and glimpse itself in the mirror of its own reflection. The infinite now. Close your eyes and listen, not to the ticking of a clock, but to the silence between ticks. That silence is where time becomes strange. You feel it passing, like sand slipping through a fist, yet somehow you're always here, always now. But what if this moment isn't moving at all? What if it's standing still, and you're the one shifting? Time, to us, feels like a river. It flows forward, pulling yesterday into memory and tomorrow into mystery. But in certain corners of physics, that river vanishes. The equations don't demand a direction. They whisper something wilder, that past, present, and future may exist all at once, like pages of a closed book. The story feels like it's unfolding only because you're flipping the pages, but the ending is already there. Imagine a photon, pure light, born in a star traveling across galaxies. To it, time doesn't tick. There is no before and after. From emission to arrival, there is no journey, no waiting, no aging. it lives in a kind of eternal now. And if light can do that, why not consciousness? Do you ever feel like you've lived this moment before? She asked, staring at her coffee, not quite drinking it. Sometimes, he replied, eyes lost somewhere past the window. But not like déjà vu, more like the moment's too complete, too familiar, as if it never really left. And if it didn't? She whispered. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Maybe now isn't the smallest slice of time, it's the whole cake, and we're only tasting one bite at a time. Maybe your childhood, your old age, and your very last breath are all suspended in this timeless lattice, existing together but separated by your attention, like stars you can't see until night. And what then is memory, if not just a spotlight dancing across a frozen field of moments? Perhaps it's not something that happened and passed, but something you're still inside of, just out of view. And death, if everything is always happening, may not be an ending, but a folding, a shift in perception. The next chapter was already written, and you're already reading it elsewhere. So sit with this moment. Let it swell like a tide held still. Notice the space between words, between thoughts. That's where the infinite lives, not in hours or years, but in the depth of presence. The paradox is gentle and beautiful. Now isn't fleeing from you. It's waiting for you to notice it never left. And just as you settle into the stretch of time, as the world slows to a breath, we must ask, if even time bends to mystery, what happens when reason itself reaches its edge? What happens when logic breaks? Boltzmann brains and the fake universe. In the hush of late night, when the noise of the world has faded and thought becomes its own universe, a question arises, uninvited but persistent. What if everything you know is a lie? Not by malice, but by probability. A single brain, disembodied, suspended in the void of deep entropy. No stars, no galaxies, no earth beneath your feet. And yet, this brain thinks it was on Earth. It remembers birthdays and heartbreaks, books it read and people it loved. It remembers pressing play on this video. But it's all fiction, because this brain was never born. It flickered into existence from random quantum noise, fully formed, with memories that never happened. This is the paradox of the Boltzmann brain. According to the rules of thermodynamics, particularly the second law, order is unlikely, but not impossible. In an infinite, ever-expanding universe filled with chaos, rare pockets of order can spontaneously arise. And forming one thinking brain is far, far easier than recreating a whole universe from scratch. Statistically, it's more probable that you are a temporary mind, birthed from disorder, than a participant in a genuine, consistent reality. That's the unsettling conclusion. A man once asked, "But if I'm just a Boltzmann brain, then why do I feel so real?" His friend smiled faintly. Dreams feel real too, until you wake up. And yet, maybe that's the only clue that matters. You are here. You are asking. The fact that you question your own reality already sets you apart from mere randomness. A true hallucination wouldn't care about its origins, but you do. You seek coherence, meaning, continuity. Whether you are a brain floating in thermodynamic soup or a conscious being nestled in a stable universe, your wonder remains valid. It may be the only truth that survives either way. So breathe gently. You don't need certainty to find comfort. Maybe what matters isn't how long you've existed, but that you exist now. That you're holding this thought in this moment with a sense of self. Let's leave behind this unsettling quiet, the cold, statistical abyss and step into something warmer, something fuller. Because next, we're going to explore how your every thought, every flaw, every flicker of memory might just be a piece of a much greater puzzle. The puzzle of you. And yet, maybe that's the only clue that matters. You are here. You are asking. The fact that you question your own reality already sets you apart from mere randomness. A true hallucination wouldn't care about its origins, but you do. You seek coherence, meaning, continuity. Whether you are a brain floating in thermodynamic soup or a conscious being nestled in a stable universe, your wonder remains valid. It may be the only truth that survives either way. So breathe gently. You don't need certainty to find comfort. Maybe what matters isn't how long you've existed, but that you exist now. That you're holding this thought, in this moment, with a sense of self. Let's leave behind this unsettling quiet, the cold, statistical abyss, and step into something warmer, something fuller. Because next, we're going to explore how your every thought, every flaw, every flicker of memory might just be a piece of a much greater puzzle, the puzzle of you. The puzzle that assembles you. A warm breeze brushes the side of your cheek, though the window's closed. It's that kind of sensation, a memory returning without a name, like a song you forgot you knew. And just like that, you're not sure where your sense of self begins anymore. Was it always like this? Or are you only noticing now? You are not a single thought, not a single feeling, not even a single story. You are layers of past glances, handed down phrases, and invisible choices. A puzzle, but without a picture on the box. Each day, another piece slides in. Sometimes it clicks, sometimes it doesn't. But the mosaic grows anyway. Earlier today, two people waited at a bus stop. One offered the other their spot on the bench and said, "You look like you've had the kind of day where sitting makes a difference." The other smiled like it was the first time anyone had really seen them all week. Just one sentence. A new puzzle piece. And that piece might stay with them longer than the conversation ever will. That's how it works, isn't it? A word from a stranger, a childhood photograph, the scent of someone's jacket. These tiny fragments become you. They don't just visit, they settle. Some memories you picked, others picked you, and many you didn't even know were there until the right light hit. And the strangest part, you keep rearranging. One day you love thunderstorms. The next, they remind you of someone who left. Suddenly, the same rain hits differently. You didn't lose yourself. You just shuffled the tiles again. There's no center tile, no master image. That's not a flaw. It's freedom. To be a self in motion. A collage, not a sculpture. Sometimes people will ask, "Who are you really?" As if there's a final answer. But what if the better question is, who are you becoming right now? Not who you were, not who you plan to be, but who's flickering through the mirror in this very breath. Think of the last time someone asked you a small, personal favor. Could you hold this for a second? Can I use your lighter? Would you mind zipping this up? These aren't just tasks, they're reminders that someone else sees you as part of their puzzle, even for a moment. And when that happens, you shift shape, just slightly, just enough to remember you're more than your outline. And when the night gets quiet enough, when there's nothing left to perform or prove, that's when the scattered pieces start whispering to each other. They don't demand an answer. They hum with gentle continuity. You are not a fixed form. You are a living collage, a shape-shifting mosaic of borrowed light and stitched together sounds. Not a statue to be found, but a reflection to be noticed again and again, each time with a new edge. Take a slow breath in, not to still yourself, but to let yourself drift toward the next edge, because what's coming next asks us to step even closer, not into identity, but into scale, where zooming in too far makes everything vanish. Zoom in, zoom out. It never ends. Where are you right now? Not physically, but in the grand scale of things. You might say, on my bed or on Earth, but stretch the lens just slightly, and your position begins to blur, because the universe, like thought itself, has no edges, just layers, stacked upon layers, endlessly folding in and unfolding out. Zoom in, and you find skin, pores, then cells, each a tiny world. Dive deeper, organelles, DNA strands twisted like whispered secrets, atoms dancing with invisible charge, quarks flickering like notes in a cosmic symphony. And it doesn't stop. Beneath each layer, another mystery hides. Beneath the known, the unknowable waits. Now reverse it. Zoom out. Your room becomes a dot in a city grid, the city a flicker in the landscape. Up more, into cloud patterns, continents, the curvature of Earth. Then the moon drifting in its orbit, Earth as one glimmer among planets, our solar system a swirl tucked inside the Milky Way. And beyond that, billions more galaxies, like grains of sand floating in an expanding sea. Does it ever stop? Someone whispers. I don't think it can, the other replies. Even if we reached the edge, wouldn't there just be another direction? It's a gentle paradox. The closer you look, the more you realize you're part of something vast. The farther you drift, the more you remember. You began as something small. Maybe you don't exist in any one size at all. Maybe your identity, your meaning, your sense of self isn't a fixed point, but a sliding scale. Relative, fluid. From one perspective, you're just dust. From another, you carry entire universes in your mind. And maybe that's the trick of it, that the meaning of life isn't at one level or another, but in the movement between them, in the zoom, in the quiet awe that comes when you realize the infinite isn't out there or in here. It's both, at once. So as your breath slows and your mind glides into softer shapes, let go of size, let go of place. You are not small, you are not big, you are the rhythm between them. And in that rhythm, something else begins to stir. Because next, we wonder, what if thoughts don't come from you, but think through you? Thoughts that think themselves. The mind is quiet now, almost. Just the soft hum of breath, the slow rhythm of being. But then gently, it stirs. A thought arises. You didn't summon it. You didn't plan it. It just appeared, like a stranger slipping quietly into a crowded room. And perhaps that's where we begin tonight. Not with control, but with curiosity. Because not all thoughts come from you, at least not in the way you might think. There's a conversation happening inside your mind, a dialogue you don't remember starting. One voice says, I should have said something. Another interrupts, no, it's better you didn't. Neither voice sounds exactly like you, and yet they speak with your memories, your tone, your guilt. Where did they come from? Thoughts, it turns out, can be self-generating. They spark without signal. They replicate. They mutate. In the 1970s, evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins introduced the idea of a meme, not the internet joke, but something deeper. A meme, he said, is a unit of cultural information, an idea that behaves like a gene. Once it finds a host, us, it spreads. Ideas don't just live in our minds, Sometimes they use them. A person stands in line at a bakery. She's not thinking of much, maybe just watching the light shift on the tiles. Then the phrase floats in, soft and unwelcome. "You're wasting your life." She blinks. That wasn't hers. It didn't come from anything she saw or felt. But it nested there anyway, just long enough to sting. And someone behind her, a stranger, leans in and says kindly, "I like your scarf." The thought retreats. Another takes its place, a warmer one, softer. Something about how even small kindnesses have the power to disinfect the mind, as if a compliment is a lighthouse, steering attention toward a safer shore. If thoughts can think themselves, can arrive unbidden, evolve without permission, then who are you really? The thinker or the observer? Or maybe something in between? Maybe the self isn't a single voice, but an ecosystem of mental weather, gusts of memory, clouds of emotion, currents of logic, and lightning bolts of insight that come without warning. You remember that feeling, don't you? Sitting at the edge of sleep, when a memory from years ago visits without knocking. Or a melody you haven't heard since childhood starts humming in the back of your head. Those thoughts don't feel chosen. They feel grown. And yet you are not powerless. You may not plant every seed, but you do tend the garden. You decide which thoughts to water, which ones to let dry up. Attention, in this way, is an act of quiet editing. There's a man on the train. He looks tired, not from work, but from thinking. His eyes scan the floor like he's searching for something he dropped. Maybe it's the name of someone he once loved, or a question he's afraid to answer. Then, a child 2 seats away giggles, and he smiles. Not because the giggle was meant for him, but because the thought that came with it was lighter than the one before. You see, even when thoughts arrive without invitation, you don't have to let them stay forever. You can watch them, greet them, let them pass. So the question becomes, are you the source of your thoughts or their stage? Is your mind a blank canvas, or a field where ideas compete for the sun? Pause here. Let the next thought arrive, but do not chase it. Let it float like a feather landing on still water. We'll watch it together, and then let it drift. Because next, we'll explore something even stranger, the idea that what hasn't happened yet might already be speaking to you now. Retrocausality. The future affects the past. You've always thought of time as a road you walk forward on. Step by step, the past trails behind you, fading into memory, while the future lies ahead like fog on a quiet street. But what if that road winds backward? What if the footsteps you haven't taken yet are already echoing behind you? In the dimly lit corners of quantum theory, there's an idea, whispered more than shouted, that time might not be one-way traffic. The transactional interpretation of quantum mechanics dares to propose something stranger, that particles don't just send signals forward in time, but also backward. When an electron decides which slit to pass through, some interpretations suggest that your future observation is part of that decision, like the universe is answering a question before it's even asked. A pause, a breath. "Wait," says one voice, low and casual. You're saying, the future can reach back and tap the past on the shoulder? "Not exactly," comes the reply, gentle and uncertain, like a teacher unsure of their own lesson. It's more like, the past and future are holding hands behind the curtain. And when we pull the curtain back, they both let go. There are experiments, actual peer-reviewed studies, where particles behave differently depending on what you do later. It's as if your decision in the future is stitched into the pattern of the past. It sounds impossible. But then again, so did electricity. So did gravity. Now think about this not as a physicist, but as a person. What if your future self has already reached back, nudging a feeling you couldn't explain, a coincidence you brushed off, a dream that told you to turn left instead of right? And what if memory isn't just recall, but response? Maybe you're not only remembering, you're being remembered. Close your eyes. Feel how time stretches, not in a line but in folds. Events press against each other like pages in a closed book. The end already exists. You just haven't read it yet. Or maybe you have, in a dream you forgot. The paradox is elegant and terrifying. If the future can change the past, then every moment is a dialogue, not a monologue. Time isn't just something you pass through. It's something that passes through you. And as that thought settles in, quiet as snowfall, let the ripple widen. Let go of linear logic, because what comes next is not a step forward, but a slip into a deeper layer, a dream, perhaps, one that believes it's awake. The dream that thinks it's awake. You've probably had one of those mornings, the kind where you wake with your heart racing, unsure if what you just saw was real. A window that led nowhere, a voice calling your name from behind your own reflection. But then the alarm hums like a familiar lullaby, and the walls return to their place. It was just a dream. Just? But what if you never truly wake? What if this, right now, your breath, the light behind your eyelids, the gentle pressure of gravity, what if all of it is just a more stable kind of hallucination, not unreal, just less chaotic? René Descartes once sat by the fire and doubted everything. He doubted his senses, his body, even the sky above him. But he couldn't doubt that he was doubting. That kernel of awareness, he called it the foundation of truth, cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. But suppose the dream includes the thought of doubting. Suppose the dream thinks itself awake. In the middle of a quiet cafe, two strangers make eye contact as one carefully sets a book down across the table. "You've been here before?" the first asks, not looking up. The other smiles, slow and soft, only in a dream. But the croissants taste the same. They don't need to say more. There's something about shared uncertainty that soothes the edges of fear. When no one knows what's real, kindness becomes its own kind of certainty. Psychologists describe waking consciousness as a controlled hallucination, your brain predicting what the world will do next and checking just enough against your senses to keep the simulation stable. What you see isn't light, but the brain's idea of light. What you feel isn't touch, but a guessed pattern, a map drawn from inside the mind. And yet, meaning still blooms here, despite it all. The smile of a stranger when you drop your keys, the ache in your chest when a song sounds like goodbye, the strange comfort of rain tapping windows that aren't yours. Maybe reality isn't what can be proven. Maybe it's what you return to, what stays with you, what reshapes you softly in the night. And if this is a dream, then let it be the kind that forgives. The kind where the rules bend just enough to let you walk through locked doors. The kind where your past doesn't chase you. It waits like an old friend on a park bench, quietly asking, "What did you learn this time?" Let the lines blur. Let your thoughts wander past the edge of what they're allowed to question. Because the next idea knocks not on the front door, but on the rules themselves. Who wrote them anyway? And what if no one did? The rules that wrote themselves, opening a book before the first word was ever written. A book with no author, no language, just a blank page that somehow learns to write. That's what the beginning of the universe might have been. A breath before breath. A moment before even time could count itself. We often talk about the laws of physics as if they are the bedrock, unchangeable, eternal, handed down from some unseen architect. Gravity pulls, light moves, entropy climbs. But what if those rules didn't exist from the start? What if the universe didn't begin with laws, but without them? Some physicists and cosmologists suggest that the laws of nature might not be fundamental at all, that they might have emerged like patterns in sand after a wave, not decreed by a mind or etched into reality from above, but grown from randomness, fluctuation, trial. In this view, the universe didn't start with a plan. It started with noise, and in that noise, some parts echoed, others canceled out. What survived became structure. What repeated became law. So, the rules made themselves? One voice asks, lying quietly in a darkened room. Maybe, the other replies, the hush between them more spacious than the words. Like how a whirlpool forms in a river, just water, just motion, but then something stable emerges, something rule-like. Like grammar showing up in speech? Exactly, as if the universe spoke nonsense again and again until a sentence stuck. It's a strange comfort to think that even chaos knows how to settle, that beneath disorder there might be a kind of learning, a trial and error unfolding where what works stays. Not because someone decided it should, but because it lasted, and what lasts becomes truth. In this light, the speed of light isn't a commandment, it's a survivor, a byproduct of cosmic recursion, the same way rivers carve valleys, not because they're told to, but because they must flow somewhere. The rules we live by might just be the most stable outcomes of cosmic play. And so, here we are, in a world where gravity holds your blanket to your body, where the air you breathe has settled into patterns, molecules, atoms, laws, not imposed from outside, but whispered into shape from within. As that thought settles, so does the breath, and so begins the quiet descent, not into emptiness, but into return, a return to the deep space inside, where silence isn't the absence of sound, but the presence of something softer. The final thought before sleep. What if even dreams are rules trying to remember how they began? Sleep as a return to the real. There's a moment just before dreams begin where everything lets go, not with drama, not with a gasp. It's quieter than silence. Your name forgets itself. The to-do lists dissolve, and the world? It's still there perhaps, but no longer yours to carry. You don't fall asleep like someone stepping into another room. You disappear, softly like ink sinking into water. In deep sleep, you aren't a body, not a daughter, not a planner, nor a dreamer. You don't worry about what they said, or what you'll do tomorrow, because in that depth, there is no you to ask those questions. And here's the strange part. This emptiness, it doesn't frighten, it restores. There's a quiet belief in some spiritual traditions, older than time zones or traffic lights, that says this place, this depth, is home. They say the self is an echo, not a source, that you were never the waves, but the ocean, and when you sleep, you return. Two people sit across from each other on a late train. One looks up, eyes heavy, and says, "Isn't it strange how sleep is the only time we stop pretending?" The other just nods. They both close their eyes, not from tiredness, but agreement. In waking life, we perform. Even alone, we reach, try, think, hope. But sleep asks for nothing. And in that surrender, we touch something real, not a fact, not a concept, but a stillness that was always underneath, You've felt it before. A nap so deep it untied knots you didn't know were there. A moment upon waking when you couldn't remember your name and didn't need to. You were just breath and pulse and presence. Maybe this is what some call truth, not an idea to hold, but a condition to enter, not earned, not built, only remembered. Sometimes a person slips into sleep and murmurs, "It's like I finally stopped trying to be myself," and their partner, half asleep too, replies, "Maybe that's when we're most ourselves. Not in the doing, but the being. Not in the noise, but the hush beneath it." And if you've drifted a little while listening, good. That too is a kind of understanding. Not logical, but felt. Because sleep doesn't erase who you are. It simply shows you who you've been beneath all the becoming. Sink deeper. Let even these words thin and fade. Because next, we ask something that echoes across the galaxies. In a universe filled with stars, why is no one answering? The Fermi paradox. Where is everyone? The night sky feels so open, so infinite, and yet so quiet. Billions of stars, trillions of planets, and not a whisper from anyone else. It's like being in a vast cathedral, built for a crowd, yet echoing with the footsteps of just one species. Ours. This is the essence of the Fermi paradox. The haunting contradiction between the high probability of extraterrestrial civilizations and the deafening silence we receive. One evening, under a sky stitched with stars, someone asks gently, "If space is so full of life, why haven't we met anyone?" The reply is a whisper, half in thought. Maybe we're the first. Or maybe we're just not interesting enough yet. It's not arrogance that fuels the question. It's awe. Statistically, the numbers beg for company. Our galaxy alone holds over 100 billion stars. Many have Earth-like planets. Life should have had billions of years to evolve somewhere else. And yet, our telescopes return silence. No signals, no spacecraft, no visitors, just cosmic quiet. So we wonder, maybe civilizations don't last. Intelligence might be the flame that burns too fast, building weapons before wisdom, consuming worlds before compassion. Or maybe we're in a kind of quarantine, a cosmic waiting room, a test. Perhaps they're out there, watching silently, waiting for us to cross some invisible threshold of maturity before saying hello. Others suggest something colder, that advanced civilizations become so efficient, they no longer use radio waves. They compress themselves into quiet, energy-saving machines, or upload their consciousness into dimensions we cannot even detect. To them, we are ants shouting into the vacuum. Or maybe we're missing something simpler. Maybe the great silence isn't a silence at all, but a song in a frequency we haven't yet learned to hear, like dolphins calling underwater while we listen through air. A voice cuts through the drift of thought. What if we're just early? The reply comes slowly, or late. There's a strange comfort in the mystery, to not know, to be part of a question so vast, it bends the edges of sleep. We look at the stars and see not absence, but potential, not emptiness, but a mirror of our own longing to connect. And maybe that's what it's all about, not the answer, but the asking. As your thoughts float gently, like satellites in orbit, let that mystery linger in the stars. Because next, we'll explore a deeper idea still, one that questions if this entire universe might be no more real than a shadow on the wall. The universe as a hologram. You reach for the moon, and yet, your fingers touch only light. A hand extends, but what meets it is the shimmer, not the source. Maybe reality isn't something we step into, but something that plays across the screen of our senses. A light show without a backstage. There's a theory, quietly discussed among physicists like a strange dream they can't quite shake, that our universe might be a hologram. Not metaphorically, literally. That everything you touch, all this vastness, might just be a projection. The depth, the stars, even your own heartbeat, it could all be encoded on a far-off surface, like a film etched on the skin of space itself. I thought you said this cafe had an upstairs. It does, but it's not up. It's just mapped differently. We're already there. This holographic theory isn't born of wild fantasy. It emerges from the edge of black holes, where information behaves in ways that don't match our intuition. The laws of entropy, the mathematics of Hawking radiation, they whisper something odd. That the contents of a region might be fully describable by the surface surrounding it, like a snow globe that only needs its glass to know what's inside. And if that's true, if what feels solid is just encoded light, then what is depth, really? What is distance, if not a trick of translation? If the universe is written on a flat cosmic film, then maybe we are not living inside space, but beside it, skimming the illusion like fingers gliding over water, never fully submerged. Hey, do you ever feel like the subway's not moving, but the tunnel is? All the time. Or like the walls are scrolling and we're standing still. There's a certain weightlessness to this thought. Because if space is an illusion, so might be location. And with it, all the boundaries we believe to be real. The miles between two people. The space between one thought and the next. All of it. Like folds in a curtain, not gaps in the world. But here's where it turns. In a world made of illusion, what is left that's real? If everything is surface, perhaps the only depth is the one that thinks. Consciousness, then, might not be part of the projection. It might be the projector itself. A moment of silence settles, like the end of a piano note. No crescendo, no crash, just the soft drift of possibility. You are here, listening, not to a place, but to a pattern, and that pattern might be written on the wall of the cosmos, or whispered behind your eyes. Let perception flatten gently. Let the stars become symbols. Because next, we step quietly into stillness itself, and trace the seams that hold this whole simulation together. Meditation as simulation glitch. You sit still, not to escape, but to see more clearly, not to float away, but to drop inward. Beneath the surface of breath and heartbeat, beneath the churning river of thought, there's a strange and silent space, not an absence, but a presence without name. At first, the mind resists. It spins, it chatters, it protests the quiet. But gradually, like dust settling in a sunbeam, something begins to change. You notice the edges start to soften. The line between you and the air, between you and your name, starts to blur. What remains isn't quite you anymore, not the one with worries and goals and a grocery list. Just an observer, silent, aware, watching the loops of the simulation from the inside. Some call this awareness the seat of the soul. Others think it's simply a shift in neural firing patterns. But for a brief moment, it doesn't matter. Because in this space, time doesn't tick forward in straight lines. It folds. Seconds dilate. The thought, I am meditating, dissolves into, what is I? And that's when it happens. The glitch. It's not dramatic. No sparks or code raining down like in a sci-fi film. It's gentler than that. A flicker in the narrative. A feeling that the background, the very stage of consciousness, is somehow editable. You sense, not see, that reality might be built more like software than stone, flexible, patterned, perhaps even simulated. A voice in your mind says, if you can observe a thought without becoming it, then who is doing the observing? Another voice, softer, almost amused, answers, maybe you're just the debug mode. In some traditions, this is called satori. In others, the void. In modern neuroscience, it's labeled default mode network deactivation. But none of those labels capture the quiet awe of looking into the mirror of your mind and finding no reflection, just light, just presence. The boundaries between inside and outside dissolve like mist in morning sun. Thought becomes soundless. Identity becomes optional. And in this strange clarity, something whispers, not in language, but in awareness itself. You are not the program. You are the awareness watching it run. So sit, still, software. Don't chase the feeling. Don't fear the silence. Just notice the flicker behind the curtain. Because maybe stillness isn't a pause from the simulation. Maybe it's how you find the exit. And from here, we don't wake up. We enter the loop, the one that watches itself forever. Recurrence. You've been here before. There's a feeling sometimes like you've stood in this exact spot before. Not just in a memory, but in your bones. The way your fingers hover over the light switch, the way the floor creaks beneath your heel, the exact shape of silence after a question is asked. It doesn't feel new. It feels rehearsed. Déjà vu? She asks, glancing up from her tea. He nods slowly. No. It's more than that. Like I didn't just remember it. I relived it. She lets the steam rise for a beat. Maybe you did. The idea of eternal recurrence is older than language and more patient than belief. Nietzsche wrapped it in poetry, but even physics, especially the kind that hums softly in the background of the cosmos, doesn't dismiss it. If time stretches infinitely and the universe has finite forms to arrange itself into, then eventually, those forms repeat, again and again. Every choice, every tear, every laugh muffled under your pillow, every fork in the road you took, and the ones you didn't. All of it returns. You don't just live once, you live always, which raises a quiet question, one that hums beneath the breath. If this moment were to echo forever, would you change it? A man once lingered at the bus stop long after his ride had come and gone. Someone asked why. He said, "Because I liked who I was when I was waiting." That's it, isn't it? Not in the grand gestures, but in the way you stir your coffee, the kindness in the checkout line, the way you soften your voice when someone's had a hard day. If this second loops into eternity, how gently will you hold it? There's no pressure in this thought, no demand to perform, only a strange invitation to treat life like music, knowing the chorus will come back around. You don't have to sing louder, just with care. She looks up again, quiet now. If we're here again, I hope I remember to say thank you. He shrugs, a little smile. If we're here again, I hope you don't spill the tea next time. They both laugh. The sound feels ancient and new, and maybe that's what matters, not trying to escape the loop, but learning to live so fully within it that repetition becomes reverence. The mundane becomes mythic. The moment becomes cathedral. So let yourself fall into it. This night, this thought, this breath. Let repetition be your rhythm. Let recurrence be your prayer. Because up ahead, we arrive at a place where even light bends inward, where gravity is not just a force, but a secret, a place where nothing escapes, and yet nothing is truly lost. Black holes store you differently. It begins with silence, deeper than space, darker than shadow. A place where even light surrenders its name. Black holes have always been the universe's final sentence, the period at the end of a cosmic paragraph. But maybe they aren't endings at all. Maybe they're libraries written in a language we've yet to read. For a long time, we believed anything falling into a black hole was erased, pure annihilation. But then came Hawking, with his radiation and his paradox. He whispered something astonishing. The universe doesn't forget. Not really. Even if a particle crosses the event horizon, its information, the blueprint of what it was, might still be there. Not where we can reach it, but pressed like fingerprints into the fabric of the black hole's surface. "So you're saying," a voice asks in the dim hush of an imagined room, "that even if someone disappears, something of them remains?" "Not just something," another voice answers, calm and slow. "Everything, just scrambled, like a dream retold out of order, or a memory jumbled inside a locked vault. Think of a black hole not as a void, but as a vault that encrypts reality itself. It doesn't devour you, it encodes you, just like a zip file made of gravity and light. And if that's true, then the lost parts of you, the heartbreaks, the forgotten dreams, the childhood laughter you swore you'd never forget but did, they might still echo somewhere, inscribed in a gravity-bound whisper. Not gone, just beyond decoding." That strange thought hovers quietly. Maybe the universe stores everything. Maybe loss is just the illusion of distance. A sigh softens the thought. "Does that mean we're eternal?" The first voice wonders. The second voice doesn't answer immediately, just lets the silence do its work. And then, maybe not eternal, but unforgotten, even by the stars. Because if a black hole remembers, then perhaps the cosmos is keeping a backup of you. Not the surface self, but the deep code, the decisions, the dreams, the dance of molecules and meaning that made you. Maybe when you look at the night sky, one of those dark spots is holding a version of you, not alive, not conscious, but present, archived, like a story paused mid-sentence. So we linger here, just near the edge, where light curves and time forgets how to walk straight. We don't fall in. Not yet. Instead, we drift at the lip of forgetting, listening to the hush, and from here we wonder, what if identity is just a very persistent narrative, a loop the universe keeps telling itself? Stay close now, because next, we ask whether you, the story you carry, might be too convincing for your own good. Identity as fiction. There's a moment just before sleep when your name feels like someone else's, not erased, just loosened, as if identity were a coat you'd worn too long. And in that stillness, something quieter asks, who is it? Really, that's wearing it? Your identity didn't arrive like a birthmark. It's been woven, stitched together from small things. The way you react to a rainy morning, the tone you take with a friend, the job title in your email signature. But beneath all those pieces is the thread that ties them, the story you tell yourself about who you are, not facts, but plot, character, interpretation. Why do you always order that same drink? Because I'm that kind of person, I guess. And what kind is that? The kind that needs something familiar. I don't know, it just feels right. Even when we're choosing a coffee, we're upholding the mythology of ourselves. A small ritual, preserving a larger fiction. You are not the person others see. You are not even the person you see. You are the story you whisper about yourself when no one else is listening. A story shaped by old praise, old wounds, old roles you didn't choose, but still played. But stories change. That's what they're for. Sometimes it's subtle. You stop responding to an old nickname. You laugh differently. You no longer correct someone when they misremember your past. Other times it's sharper. A relationship ends. A job title fades. A version of you dissolves. And for a while, it feels like free fall. But what if that fall isn't the end of the story? What if it's a revision? A pause in the sentence before the plot takes a turn? I used to be more patient, someone says on a park bench. Or maybe now you just know what not to tolerate. We revise, not because we were wrong, but because we've outgrown the pages we once fit. In cognitive psychology, this is known as narrative identity, the sense of self built not on fixed traits, but on remembered episodes. And those memories, they bend, they blur, they're retold so often they become performance, a fable dressed in facts. And yet, there's something beautiful in that fragility. Because if you are a story, then you are not trapped. You are authored, but never finished. Sleep is the same, a slipping into something less defined. And maybe that's why it's so gentle. It reminds you that you can dissolve and return. Slightly changed, softened around the edges, ready to be rewritten. Let yourself blur a little. Let the edges of your identity feel soft, like breath on glass. Because what comes next is even older than story. A deeper rhythm, written not in words, but in the silence between stars. Mathematics, invented or discovered. In the quiet between thoughts, somewhere just before sleep, claims the edges of your awareness. A question echoes softly. Is math real? Or is it just something we made up to explain things we don't understand? Like trying to describe the wind by the way it moves the trees. A child once asked his mother, "Who made numbers?" She smiled and replied, "No one made them, love. We just noticed them." And in that moment, she whispered a belief older than language, that math is not built, but revealed, that it doesn't emerge from us, but waits to be noticed, like a fossil in stone or a constellation behind clouds. Yet the question lingers. If you look at the world, really look, you begin to see patterns. A sunflower's seeds spiral in Fibonacci sequences. A snowflake grows in sixfold symmetry. Planets trace ellipses across an invisible chalkboard of space. Somehow, mathematics speaks the language of nature more fluently than poetry or philosophy ever could. But does that mean it was always there, written into the fabric of existence like a divine script? Or is it that we, meaning-making creatures, invented the grammar and then found it fitting? Maybe we built math the way a musician builds a scale, not to reflect something out there, but to organize the music within. Do you think, one voice asks in the dark, that math would exist if no minds were here to do it? I don't know, the other replies, but black holes curve space-time whether or not we name the curve. So perhaps it's both. Perhaps math is a bridge, one end grounded in human cognition, the other reaching toward truths too vast to claim as ours. When we solve an equation, we are not so much creating meaning as participating in it, stepping into a structure that might have existed long before eyes could see or hands could write. If mathematics is discovered, then reality itself may be a story already told, numbers etched into the bones of the cosmos, waiting to be read like scripture. But if it's invented, then the act of discovery is really a kind of authorship, and the universe is shaped not only by laws, but by interpretation. Either way, the result is the same. The patterns are there. They swirl around us, beneath our feet, inside our breath. They are the code of stars, the rhythm of tides, the quiet tick behind every heartbeat. So tonight, let numbers blur and equations melt into fog. Let go of whether they're real or written. Because next, we tumble into something more chaotic, something unruly and wild. Next, we ask, what if reality itself is built on randomness? Quantum dice, reality by chance. Somewhere beneath the layers of what we call certainty, reality quivers. It's not the trembling of fear or cold or doubt. It's the shimmer of possibility, so small, so quiet, you wouldn't notice unless you stopped everything else. Even time seems to pause near it. A man once dropped his Metro card 3 times in a row. The same pocket, the same motion, the same gravity. But the 3rd time, it slid perfectly into the reader like it had always known the rhythm. 3rd time's the charm. He laughed softly to no one in particular. A woman next to him smiled and whispered, maybe the first 2 were just practice rolls. And that's what physics whispers too, quietly but with no less wonder. At the quantum level, nothing is solid, nothing is set. An electron doesn't orbit like a moon. It waits. It hums in a haze of maybe, of nearly, of could be. Only when we look does it make a decision. Not because it's shy, but because that's how the rules work down there. If you can even call them rules. They're more like possibilities holding hands. Einstein once said, God doesn't play dice. He couldn't accept that the foundation of existence would gamble. But reality never asked for permission to be strange. And when physicists set up their delicate detectors, waiting for particles to go left or right, up or down, they don't find a plan. They find chance, and not wild chance, predictable randomness, a controlled chaos that paints the universe, dot by shimmering dot. So perhaps the question isn't why the universe rolls its dice, but what it's trying to tell us each time. Maybe you weren't supposed to bump into that old friend. Maybe you were. Maybe the timing of that green light saved you from a headache, or delayed you just enough to meet someone who changed your week. 2 baristas once traded shifts last minute. One of them met her future partner that night. The other discovered a new passion for sketching in the quiet lull of the closing hour. When outcomes aren't fixed, life becomes something gentler, more like water, less like stone. It means the improbable isn't something that happens rarely. It's something that must happen given enough rolls. You, sitting here, your life's exact path, the way your name sounded in the mouth of your first teacher. These aren't exceptions. They're inevitabilities, written by chance, framed by wonder. And in a world like that, sleep is just another kind of unfolding. The moment when the dice roll without your eyes, when your breath becomes the observer and your dreams the experiment. So rest now, because next, we follow the strands of vibrating possibility, strings so tiny they might be singing the very laws that hold everything together. Let the dice settle and listen. String theory, threads of nothing. There is a kind of softness in the silence between thoughts, like a violin string that's just been plucked, still trembling in the air. Beneath the atoms, beyond the protons, deeper even than quarks. What if reality hums? String theory, with all its elegant math and infuriating beauty, whispers that the universe isn't made of dots or particles, but threads. Tiny, one-dimensional strings, so minuscule they stretch across dimensions we'll never quite see. And these aren't just silent threads. They vibrate, they sing. Each frequency a different particle, a different law, a different kind of existence. Imagine this. You're not solid. You're symphonic. Every bit of your body, from eyelashes to synapses, is a cascade of vibrations. The you that feels, the you that thinks, the you that aches or dreams, all of it, just a chord in the grand composition. Matter becomes melody, forces become rhythm, and the universe? A song, infinitely intricate, infinitely alive. Wait, one voice says in the quiet. Does that mean we're made of music? The other smiles, eyes half closed like drifting on a lullaby. Maybe not made of music. Maybe we are music, but not the kind you hear, the kind the universe listens to. There's something weightless about this idea. If everything is vibration, then every encounter is a harmony, every conflict, a discord, and every step, every breath, part of a larger pattern. Perhaps the things that feel broken aren't flawed. They're just waiting for the next movement in the song. In some distant dimension, those strings might be curling around themselves, forming loops, creating gravity and light. In others, maybe they stretch infinitely, weaving a kind of cosmic loom. And on that loom, the tapestry of reality hangs, not painted in color or shaped in clay, but threaded with silence and sound, with presence and pause. Some physicists say we might live in a multiverse, each universe a different tuning of the cosmic instrument, some strung too tight, others too loose. But here we are, balanced just enough to dream. Let this lullaby soften you. Let your thoughts fall like leaves drifting on still water. Let the strings fade, not because they end, but because they return to quiet. Because next, we step into the space between vibrations, not emptiness, but pure potential. The void that contains everything. There's a silence deeper than silence, not the absence of noise, but the presence of something so vast it quiets everything else. It's the pause in a conversation when no one speaks, yet something has been said, the space between thoughts, the breath between two words. Is this seat taken? Someone asks softly beside you. You glance up. No, you say. They smile, not in a rush, not needing to explain why, just two strangers coexisting in the same shared stillness. That, in a way, is the void. We've been taught to fear emptiness, as if it's a loss, a failure, a vanishing. But not all that is invisible is gone. In both ancient texts and quantum theory, emptiness isn't absence, it's potential. In physics, even a perfect vacuum isn't truly empty. What looks like nothing is buzzing with energy. Quantum fluctuations, popping in and out of existence like thought bubbles. From this field of quiet chaos, particles emerge. Light flickers into being. Matter finds form. The nothingness is creative. And in Buddhism, shunyata, emptiness, is not hollow, but interwoven. A bowl is useful not because of its shape, but because of the empty space it holds. Emptiness allows things to be. Your mind, too, has its own shunyata, the quiet behind the noise, the space where insight appears not through effort, but by making room. Two people stand beside each other in an elevator. Neither speaks, and yet there's a weight to the moment. Not awkwardness, but presence, as if the silence itself is holding both of them upright. Maybe that's the nature of this void, not a cold vacuum, but a warm stillness, a space that says, I'm not here to overwhelm you. I'm here to hold what you haven't found words for yet. There's a strange peace in knowing that the most powerful moments in life often arrive wrapped in quiet. The room before the performance begins, the breath before a kiss, the moment just before waking, when you still half belong to the dream. Maybe the void is not what ends the story, But what begins it? Not the final page, but the blank one waiting for ink. Not an abyss, but a seed. You okay? Someone murmurs on a dimly lit bench at the bus stop, their voice soft enough to vanish into the night. You nod, more to the silence than to them. Just thinking. They don't press, just sit beside you, like the void itself, witnessing, holding, allowing. Emptiness is not failure. It's the readiness to receive. It's the space that allows all things to arise. And maybe, just maybe, the parts of you that feel empty are only waiting for something unexpected to take form. So rest there, in the soft hollow between sound and meaning, in the stillness that contains more than motion ever could, because what enters the void doesn't vanish, it transforms, it echoes, it begins. Information never dies. Do you think the universe forgets? The question lingers in the hush between two tired voices, lying in the dark where sleep hasn't quite arrived, but the mind has already begun to wander. I don't know, comes the reply. I forget things all the time, but maybe the universe isn't like me. What if everything you've ever done, every word whispered into the night, every breath drawn in solitude, every silent decision still exists? Not in your memory, which fades, not in photographs or journals which crumble, but embedded somehow into the fabric of reality itself. According to some interpretations of quantum mechanics, the information carried by a particle can never truly be destroyed. Burn a book, and its words vanish in smoke and ash, but the quantum information of that paper, ink, heat, and light, it disperses, it scatters, but it remains, a different form, a whisper encoded in the chaos. Imagine reality as a cosmic lake. You step into it, and ripples emerge. You leave, but the ripples don't vanish. They blend, they drift outward, they touch other ripples. Your presence may become impossible to trace, but the water is never the same. You are written into the surface tension of being, not carved in stone, but breathed into everything. In this view, you're not just passing through time, you're weaving yourself into it. Every moment you live folds itself into the quiet archive of the cosmos. You're not forgotten, not even the smallest version of you, not the laugh you lost at 12, not the tears you swallowed at 28. Some physicists speak of the universe as a giant ledger, not unlike an eternal blockchain, unforgiving, permanent, every quantum event recorded, subtly, invisibly. You, as information, cannot be unmade. Even death doesn't erase, it only rearranges. So when you feel like your existence is small, when it feels like you're a passing thought in an indifferent world, remember this: even your smallest act is recorded. You may vanish from photographs and memories, but you are encoded into reality's code, not a glitch, a line in the infinite poem. Then maybe nothing is really gone, the first voice whispers again. No, the second says, quieter now. Just changed. Let that permanence drift through you, soft as breath. The knowledge that somewhere, somehow, you are still here, even when you're not. And with that comforting thread of forever in your chest, we now gently turn toward a darker truth, that everything beautiful eventually falls apart. Entropy and the poetry of decay. Somewhere in a kitchen, a slice of bread softens in the open air, a quiet rebellion against its once crisp shell. Nothing dramatic, just time doing what it always does. You look at it and think, things fall apart. But maybe they don't fall, they unfold. Entropy is not a villain in hiding. It is the quiet rule written beneath everything we touch. A soft law, not of destruction, but of release, of letting go. In the language of physics, entropy is the measure of disorder. It sounds harsh, but in reality, it's a whisper. It's how a snowflake melts not in anger, but in surrender. How skin folds not in punishment, but in story. Left alone, all systems lean into chaos, not because they're broken, but because they're free. Do you ever keep old concert tickets? Someone asks, settling into the chair beside you. You nod, unsure why. They're not useful, but they hold something, a kind of beautiful ruin. That's entropy too, the fading ink, the crumpled corner, the echo of sound long gone but not forgotten. You realize then that decay is not the loss of meaning. It's the shape that meaning takes once it's done being new. A candle flickers lower, not as defeat, but as a gesture of closure. The flame isn't gone. It's simply elsewhere now. Maybe in smoke, maybe in memory, or maybe in that soft orange haze still warming the room. You stretch your legs. The day lingers on your skin. You think of your childhood room, the poster peeling at the edge, the way the light used to pour in sideways. Entropy made that too. It paints with slow hands. It is the artist of the dusk, the composer of endings that lead gently into new beginnings. A voice again. I never delete voicemails from my grandmother, even though the phone's full. You smile. There's a certain tenderness in letting time do its work, not to resist it, but to witness it. The cup that cracks, the tree that leans, the laugh lines that remember joy more than mirrors ever will. Decay is transformation. The shape you wore yesterday feeds the form you become today. The world shifts not to erase you, but to remix you, like a melody that dissolves into silence just before becoming a different song. So as you exhale, maybe longer this time, let yourself feel that subtle unraveling, the permission to soften, the freedom in not needing to hold it all together. Because the story doesn't end when things fall apart. Often it begins again right there. And from here, we move on, not to escape, but to explore. For even light, yes, even light, refuses to walk just one path. But that's a strange secret we'll follow. Next. Photons that take both paths. It begins with something as simple as a particle of light. A photon, you send it toward a wall with two slits, two paths it could take, left or right. A decision. But the photon doesn't decide. It doesn't need to. Instead, it chooses both. Or rather, it refuses to choose at all. When unobserved, the photon acts like a wave, rippling through space, sliding through both slits at once, interfering with itself. But the moment you place a detector, a quiet act of watching, the wave collapses. The photon picks a slit, becomes a particle, becomes definite, and in doing so, the dance of bothness disappears. What does that mean? That light, when left alone, exists in a state of maybe. It travels all paths, holds all positions, contains all possibilities. And only when you look does it become one thing. Here, not there. Wait, she says, her voice low beneath the warm hum of night. Are you telling me that the universe doesn't decide until we're paying attention? He nods, not fully smiling, but something close. I'm saying, maybe reality waits for us, like a book that isn't written until you open the page. She thinks about that, about how light moves across the room, glinting off the corner of a photo frame. Then when I close my eyes, what's still real? Everything, he says, and nothing, until you open them again. This isn't fiction. In quantum physics, the double-slit experiment is one of the strangest, most beautifully unsettling truths we've ever uncovered. It isn't just about photons. Electrons, atoms, entire molecules have demonstrated the same behavior. Superposition, being in many places at once, until we interrupt, until we observe, until we collapse the uncertainty. So what does that say about us? Maybe it says we are not passive witnesses. Maybe it says our attention is not neutral, that when we look, really look, we participate in shaping the world. Maybe choice isn't something that comes after reality. Maybe choice is reality's trigger. There's something gentle and terrifying in that idea, that your gaze matters, that your presence rearranges the world in subtle ways you'll never see, and that even light, ancient and fast and free, waits for your permission before choosing where to land. So close your eyes for a moment. Let all paths exist. Let the photons slip through both doors. Let the universe remain uncertain, soft, wave-like. Because next, we drift into a deeper paradox. What if your mind already knows your decision before you do? You predict more than you know. A woman waits at a bus stop. She shifts her weight, eyes darting left, then right. A few moments later, she steps back, just before a cyclist speeds past where she stood. No sound warned her. No conscious reason told her to move. Still, she knew. That kind of knowing, that quiet, shapeless whisper, isn't magic. It's the brain, working in shadows. Before you speak, before you decide, before you even notice, your mind is already at work, laying out possibilities, sketching timelines in invisible chalk. Scientists studying the motor cortex discovered that it sparks with activity before a person consciously decides to act. Long before you move, your body is already moving. Long before you think, your brain is rehearsing the thought. In that gap, between impulse and intention, your future is rehearsed again and again until it looks inevitable. Did you know what I was going to say? He smiled, fork frozen halfway to his mouth. You raised your eyebrow halfway through the sentence. It always means you're about to say something mildly sarcastic. She laughed. You're keeping score now? Number but. Your rhythm is predictable, like music. And there it is, rhythm. We feel it in language, in steps, in silence. When someone pauses too long, we know something is off. When a smile fades too soon, we sense discomfort. We don't think, we just feel. Like tuning forks placed too close together, our brains begin to vibrate in time with the world, with each other. Even in randomness, we forecast. The next step, the next glance, the next word. Some researchers say these moments might even resemble precognition, not supernatural, but deeply natural. A kind of whisper from the brain's oldest circuits, built to survive, to predict, to prepare. But what if it's more than survival? What if intuition is a kind of internal time travel? Not to distant years, but to the near future, seconds, minutes ahead. Memory usually runs backward, mapping what's been. But perhaps, tucked in the folds of your subconscious, is a reverse mirror. One that reflects not what you've done, but what's already forming just beyond the now. A child walking home alone often knows which alley to avoid without knowing why. A pianist can hit the right note before consciously registering the chord. Maybe we've been trained by time itself, loop after loop, to read the patterns we once ignored. I don't know why I turned around, he says softly, watching the candle flicker on the table. But I did, and there she was, as if she was always going to be there. Prediction doesn't need to shout. It murmurs. A footstep ahead, a pause before a sigh, a chill that arrives just before the rain. These are not accidents. They are echoes. Echoes of what hasn't happened yet. So if your chest tightens before you speak, or if you feel a hand brushing your thoughts when no one's near, trust that. It may be the version of you just slightly ahead, whispering back through the blur, urging you towards something already unfolding. Let that sense stay with you, not as certainty, but as comfort. Your mind knows more than it tells you, and in its silence, it often speaks the loudest. Now breathe slowly. Let those future echoes pass like wind through a curtain. Because what comes next may not walk in a straight line at all. Your mind navigates non-linearly. It begins not with a step, but with a skip, a flicker of memory, a flash of sound, the soft thrum of something you can't quite name. You don't think in lines. You never did. A single word might send you backward 10 years. A shadow on a wall might recall the warmth of your grandmother's kitchen. The mind, like a dreamer in flight, chooses not to walk forward, but to leap sideways, backward, inward. "Hey," someone murmurs in the dark, their voice barely louder than thought itself. Have you ever smelled something and suddenly felt transported? Their friend shifts slightly beneath the covers. "Yeah, cinnamon makes me cry sometimes. I don't even know why." And that's the mystery. Not the memory, but the way it finds you. Not the logic, but the leap. A smell is not just a scent, it's a wormhole. A melody is not just a sound, it's a boat, ferrying you across the sea of your own inner time. There's no map, only meaning. No order, only echo. Computers calculate. They follow rules, one line after another. If this, then that. But you see a red balloon and suddenly remember a playground from your childhood, the one you haven't thought about in 15 years. And with it comes the sound of your father's laugh, the scrape of gravel, the way you held your breath when you thought the world might end at age 7. Your mind doesn't move, it dances. And if thought isn't linear, maybe time isn't either. Maybe time folds the way paper does, creases that let you jump between places that were never meant to be neighbors. What if your life isn't a road, but a spiral staircase? You pass the same windows again and again, but from higher vantage points each time. You loop, not because you're lost, but because this is how learning happens, not in lines, but in layers. The world tells you to move forward, but the mind remembers sideways. It heals in zigzags. It grows in loops. Another quiet voice, half asleep now, says, "So, is it bad to revisit old thoughts, old pain?" The reply comes like a lullaby. Not if you return as someone new. Let your thoughts spiral softly now. Let them return, not to trap you, but to show you how far you've come. Because what's coming next is not a step, but a wave. The rhythm that breathes beneath language, the pulse that connects every echo. You are not lost. You are simply looping, becoming. Consciousness as waveform. Maybe the reason you can't always find yourself is because you're not standing still. Maybe you're not a point, but a pattern. A vibration humming across the fabric of now and then. Not a particle, but a wave. Consciousness, like light, resists being pinned down. In quantum physics, a particle spreads like a wave until it's observed. Only when we look does it seem to decide where it is. But before that, it's everywhere it could be. Maybe your mind does the same. You feel focused, located, grounded, only when something calls you into attention. The rest of the time, you're pulsing, dispersed, alive in memory, drifting in imagination, echoing in someone else's thoughts. You are not just here. You're also where you've been, and where you might still go. There's a quiet moment in a cafe. Two people waiting for their orders, both watching the same drizzle beyond the glass. One turns and says, "Funny how time stretches when it rains, like it's waiting with us." And the other, without meaning to, replies, "Or maybe it's us who stretch, like rubber bands snapping back when the world slows down." Neither speaks after that. But for a breathless second, their minds ripple into each other. That feeling of being understood without direction is a kind of resonance, consciousness sinking, not by force, but by tone. You might notice it when you laugh at the same part of a movie as a stranger, or when someone finishes your thought before you say it. Those are harmonics, your consciousness in waveform, brushing against another. And when your thoughts, emotions, and memories align, you feel more you than ever. But that you is not fixed. It vibrates. It reforms. The melody shifts every time you remember differently, every time you forgive, every time you let go. Sometimes you can't sleep because your thoughts feel tangled. But maybe they're not knots. Maybe they're chords. Your mind trying to find a frequency it can rest in. The static isn't brokenness. It's tuning. Let yourself drift with the rhythm. No pressure to hold on. You're not meant to stay in one shape forever. Even the ocean isn't the same wave twice. Your consciousness isn't trapped in the skull. It echoes in the spaces between words, in the silence that falls after a deep sigh, in the pause before you say, "I'm okay," and almost mean it. You ripple through the present like soft breath on glass, visible for a second, then becoming air again. And when you're too tired to think, too full to feel, your waveform doesn't disappear. It just rests, like music in a room after the speaker stops, still there, in memory, in motion, in meaning. So feel the ebb now. Let your mind soften at the edges. Let the sharpness blur, not because you're losing yourself, but because you're returning to all the places you've always been. We're about to drift somewhere stranger, a place where time doesn't pass. It pulses. Time crystals and eternal patterns. Now, imagine a structure that dances without music, forever, not just repeating, but resisting the silence of decay. That's the mystery of time crystals. They aren't like anything we're used to. In the world we know, everything winds down. Motion loses steam. Energy dissipates. But these strange formations, born in the deepest corners of physics, don't obey that rule. They pulse in a kind of cosmic loop, oscillating through time like a heartbeat that never fades. A time crystal moves, not in space, but in time itself, forever caught in a rhythm that never tires. A girl once asked her grandfather, "If everything gets older and breaks, how come some things keep going forever?" He smiled and pointed at her tiny bracelet, an old one with small, colorful beads. "You see how the colors repeat?" She nodded. Some things don't last by standing still. They last by moving in patterns. In normal crystals, like salt or diamonds, atoms are arranged in repeating patterns across space. You cut them, and the symmetry continues inside. But time crystals do something far stranger. They repeat not in space, but in time, created under delicate conditions using lasers and quantum particles. They pulse endlessly without external input, defying the rule that everything must eventually slow, stop, and fade. They break what's called time translation symmetry, the notion that the laws of physics are the same today as they were yesterday. So what does it mean, really, that such a thing exists? It means that not all repetition is decay. Some cycles don't spiral down, they spiral inward, like breath in meditation. Or they spiral outward, like the unfolding petals of a sunflower tracking the sun. Maybe you too have patterns that live across time. The rituals you return to when you're lost. The songs that reappear in your life quietly every few years. A journal, a prayer, a scent. These may be your personal time crystals, resonating not in physics labs, but in memory, in spirit. Do you think people can be like that too? The girl asked. Like what? Keep going forever, in a pattern. He thought for a moment. Yes, some souls aren't linear, they echo. In a universe that drifts slowly toward disorder, toward heat death and randomness, time crystals stand like tiny defiant rhythms, proof that some structures aren't just destroyed by time. They use it. They bend it into a dance. And maybe that's all any of us are doing, trying to find the right step, the right sequence, the right meaning that holds even as everything else fades. Let the rhythm carry you now. Let the pulse beneath the silence remind you, not everything ends. Some things loop, some patterns remain. And from here, we drift deeper, toward the moment where language itself can't follow, where meaning isn't said, but felt. Language as a trap for thought. There's a quiet kind of prison we all live inside. One with no walls, no locks, and no guards. Only words. A phrase on a billboard. A sentence you once heard in childhood. A name you gave yourself without knowing. Language is everywhere. It arranges your memories, narrates your fears, and defines what you believe is possible. But there's a hidden catch. It doesn't just describe your world, it builds it. Late one evening at a quiet train platform, two strangers waited beneath the flickering lights. One turned to the other and asked, "Do you ever feel like you're saying what you should say, not what you mean?" The second smiled faintly. "I say what I have words for, and sometimes that's not enough." Language gives us bridges, but not every feeling wants to cross. Some truths are too wide for syntax, some sorrows too delicate to wear a noun. You've felt it too, trying to explain why something hurts, but every word seems like the wrong size. You say fine when you mean fractured. You say tired when you mean lost. And so we use metaphors as crutches for the unspeakable. We say the heart is heavy. That time flew. That silence fell. But in truth, the heart doesn't weigh more when you miss someone, and silence has no wings. Yet somehow, those phrases feel right, not because they are true in form, but because they are true in feeling. If language is a net, then metaphor is the shimmer that escapes through its threads. But there's a gentler danger too, because the words you use begin to use you. Repeat something long enough, and it becomes a truth, a habit, a self. Tell yourself, "I'm not good at that," and watch how your hands start to hesitate. Call someone just dramatic, and you might never notice they were actually grieving. And yet, some things thrive outside vocabulary. The sound of rain on your roof, the ache in your chest when someone says goodbye without saying anything at all. The way two people look at each other across a crowded room and understand everything, without a single syllable. Sometimes the most meaningful experiences are the ones you cannot explain, and when you finally stop trying to force meaning into words, you might discover a kind of freedom, a space between thought and speech where something purer lives. Not silence as absence, but silence as presence. A breathing room where emotions aren't boxed, just witnessed. "Didn't you want to say something back?" someone asks. "No," you reply gently. "I think we both understood." So tonight, If your thoughts start to wrap themselves in complicated phrases, if they loop into language that feels more like armor than honesty, let them unravel. Let the words soften. Because not everything needs to be spoken to be real, and not every truth wears a name. Let that silence settle softly around you, a silence that speaks not in sentences, but in sighs. Because next, we step into a stranger question. What if the world around you is listening to what you long for? Desire that creates reality. What if reality bends, ever so slightly, toward the things you long for, not in the loud, greedy way of forced manifestation, but in the soft ache of quiet wanting, in the almost whisper of your thoughts as they loop again and again around something missing, something not yet real, but almost felt. Desire, in its rawest form, isn't a flaw. It's not a mistake in your programming. It's the seed, the spark. In the ancient myths, the universe doesn't begin with logic. It begins with longing, a cosmic ache, a yearning so deep it splits silence into light. Even in modern physics, some theories suggest the observer plays a role not just in measuring the world, but in choosing which world emerges. A particle's path exists in all possibilities until one is observed, until intention shapes the waveform into something solid, something lived. And maybe your wanting is like that. Maybe it doesn't just sit in your chest, helpless. Maybe it moves, quietly, beneath reality's skin. Like water pulling toward the moon, your focus subtly reshapes the tides of experience. Not because you're in control, but because you're in contact. There's a quiet conversation happening between you and the world. You ache, it listens. You imagine, it arranges. Slowly, invisibly, like a hand beneath cloth, lifting. Your dreams are not commands, but invitations, and some realities, some moments, only appear because you kept reaching for them. Do you think the world knows what we want? Maybe not in words, but in the way we linger, the way we notice, the way we return. So desire is a kind of gravity? Maybe. Maybe it pulls the unseen closer. Maybe it's how we touch what hasn't happened yet. And if that's true, if attention is creative, then nothing is truly still. Even now, as your mind drifts, even now, as your eyes grow heavier, a part of you is shaping the path ahead. Not with force, but with softness, with ache, with care. So let your desire rest, not because it doesn't matter, but because it already has. The wanting has already begun to write. And now, as you fall deeper into quiet, we begin to question another truth, that what separates you from everything else may not be real at all. The illusion of separate selves. A soft sigh of wind slips through the window. Someone on the street murmurs something to a friend, words you can't hear, but your body still reacts, just slightly, like the hum of a tuning fork catching a distant note. That's the strange thing, isn't it? You're lying here, still, quiet. But the world continues, inside you. From the moment you first heard the word I, the split began. You were taught the shape of your name, your reflection, your story. You learned to draw the line. This is me, that is not. But what if that line was never real, only drawn in fog, only held in place by habit? The truth pulses beneath skin and language. You inhale, and with it, fragments of forests, oceans, and people you'll never meet. The oxygen in your lungs was crafted in leaves. The carbon in your bones is older than memory. Even your heartbeat, though silent to the ear, was formed in a rhythm shaped by lullabies, arguments, street sounds, other people's stress. Your body listens to the world, not just your mind. In neuroscience, there's no clean edge between you and the other. Mirror neurons blur the lines. You flinch when you see someone stub their toe. You feel relief when a stranger smiles. Even pain can be borrowed. "Hey," someone whispers behind you on a quiet bus. "I think you dropped this." You didn't realize it, but they saw you. That moment, brief, ordinary, shakes the illusion. For a second, you're not alone in your skin. You're part of a choreography bigger than thought, more ancient than speech. Mystics once called it entanglement, not the physics kind, the human kind. The way laughter echoes through a room, the way grief spills between two people in silence, the way you pick up the mood of someone you barely know, just because they entered the elevator. And maybe that's the point. That selfhood was never a possession, only a performance. The you cling to is made of others, their gestures, their kindnesses, even their absence. Identity isn't a fence. It's a field, something you walk through, something that changes depending on the weather, the hour, the company. There's a moment at a cafe counter. Two people bump elbows, both reaching for sugar. One chuckles and steps back. "Go ahead, I've got time." The other replies softly, "Thanks. I needed that." Nothing more is said, but in that pause, identity bends. Roles dissolve. Only recognition remains. So if you've been carrying the weight of being someone, always consistent, always certain, let it ease. You don't have to be a single shape. You're not a separate creature fighting against the world. You are a breath in its chest, a ripple in its lake. Let the borders soften. Let the idea of me loosen its grip. Not to lose yourself, but to find where you are always connected. And as your sense of self begins to drift gently, we descend further. Because next, we peer into the smallest places in existence, where even particles wait for awareness to become real. Particles don't exist until. You're telling me this chair might not be real? No, I'm telling you it becomes real the moment you sit in it. Reality, solid, stubborn, dependable, is a story we whisper to ourselves just long enough to stay sane. But beneath that certainty, something stranger stirs. At the quantum level, things aren't things at all. They don't sit there, waiting for you to find them. Particles aren't little marbles humming quietly in space. They're waves of possibility, floating like music that hasn't yet been played, until someone listens. In quantum mechanics, this isn't poetry. It's law. Electrons don't occupy a point until measured. A photon doesn't pick a path until watched. Reality doesn't reveal its face until you look into it. And before that gaze, there's only a shimmer, a maybe, a waiting. One might imagine the universe as a stage with no actors until the audience arrives. Measurement isn't just seeing, it's summoning. When you observe, you collapse a probability wave. You draw a card from the deck and the hand is dealt. But until then, the deck floats. Everything that could happen still might. "So when I reach for this glass," she asked, "was it already there?" Or, he replied, "did your intention call it into place?" We tend to walk through life believing the world is built of things, defined, independent, fully formed. But quantum theory hints otherwise. Maybe we're not in a world of objects, but a field of potentials, a matrix of possibility that only snaps into shape under the weight of awareness. It's not that the world is fake, it's more that it's unfinished, like a painting that renders itself only where your eyes linger. You don't just live in the world, you participate in its birth, over and over again. Each glance, each thought, is a brushstroke, a vote for this version of reality over the infinite others. And what does that make you? Maybe more than a visitor. Maybe something like a co-creator, not a god, but not just a witness either. Something in between, an echo, collapsing the chorus of what could be into what is. Let that possibility hover for a while. Let it stir gently against the edges of your assumptions. Because if reality only becomes real when looked at, what other truths might be waiting, just out of sight? And next, perhaps most haunting of all, we ask, is prophecy real? Or are we merely catching glimpses of patterns too vast to fully grasp? Patterns that were always there, waiting to be observed. Prophecy or pattern recognition. You ever notice how sometimes you just know something's going to happen before it does? A chill runs down your spine, or a sudden stillness fills the air. Maybe it's a hunch. Maybe it's déjà vu. Or maybe it's your brain doing what it does best, reading patterns. The mind is not built to see the world as it is, but to interpret it, to connect dots where no one else even sees a grid. We are creatures of rhythm. Our ancestors didn't survive by brute force alone. They listened to the rustle in the grass, to the clouds before a storm, to the silence before something broke. Over time, this became instinct, and sometimes prophecy. But perhaps prophecy isn't magic. Perhaps it's just the name we give to ultra-deep awareness, the ability to see a moment not as isolated, but as part of a long thread. A thread stretching backward through memory and forward into something almost visible, like when a violin string is plucked and the note carries further than your ears can follow, but something in you still resonates. Do you think people can really see the future? Maybe not see it, but feel its gravity, like how you can tell when rain's about to fall before the first drop touches your skin, like a whisper under the noise? Exactly. Not a voice from the sky, more like a feeling buried in the present, trying to speak. So the question becomes, what are we actually hearing when we dream of things that later unfold? What are we sensing when an idea arrives before logic justifies it? Science might call it anticipation. Ancient texts call it vision. But at its heart, maybe it's all the same thing. A form of ultra-attunement, a tuning fork inside you vibrating to subtle shifts in reality. Not predicting, but listening. And that changes everything, because it means the future is not a fixed script, but a field of potential songs, and your awareness is what makes one hum louder than the rest. You don't pull the future from thin air. You recognize the shape it's already starting to take. So next time a strange knowing visits you in the quiet, don't be so quick to doubt it. You might not be seeing destiny. You might be sensing momentum. And maybe, just maybe, some part of you already knows how the story wants to go. Let that thought rest for now. Because next, we leave the patterns behind and look inward, to the soft illusion that says, I am me. But are you, really? Why you is an approximation. You say me, but that word can't quite carry the weight of what you are. It feels solid, familiar, like an anchor. But if we look gently, without force, we notice something strange. The anchor keeps drifting. Your cells replace themselves every few years. Bones, skin, blood, rebuilt silently while you sleep, eat, dream. Your thoughts too. Don't stay. They circle, they flicker, they argue with last week's version of you. And sometimes, they win. At a cafe, someone taps your shoulder. You dropped this, they say, handing you a notebook you forgot you owned. You open it. The handwriting is yours. But the mind who wrote it? A stranger wearing your name. Was this ever really me? you wonder? Or just a moment, a snapshot from a moving train? The truth is, nothing stays still long enough to be captured and kept. Memories shift as we remember them. Desires melt into new shapes. Even pain, when left in silence, reshapes itself into insight or disappears completely. And yet, we continue saying I, as if it's a constant star, not a blinking signal from a satellite always in orbit. That I is helpful. It gets us through conversations. It signs forms. It apologizes when we're late. But under that name, there's a process, not a person. One voice in your mind says, I used to hate crowds, now I crave company. The other replies, funny how you still call yourself I, like that hasn't changed everything. It's like calling a river by one name when the water is always new, like pointing at a flame and trying to bottle its shape. Perhaps you is a sketch, a soft pencil line that keeps getting erased and redrawn, a version in flux. This isn't a flaw, it's how we survive. You adapt, you update, you approximate, not a fixed identity, but a continuity, persuasive enough to live with. And so, when you say me, let it be said gently, like the outline of something always arriving, but never quite done. A whisper in the dark that says, I was, and I will be, and right now, I am just enough. Let that be enough for tonight, because next we drift beyond the I into something even more unlikely. Could a planet dream of its own orbit? Could a galaxy feel the tug of a forgotten memory? Close your eyes if you haven't already. The next answer doesn't need your name. Are planets conscious? What if the ground beneath your feet isn't just matter, but memory? What if the wind brushing past your cheek is not just air, but breath, conscious and watching? There's a thought that lingers in the quiet places of philosophy, and it whispers something strange, that consciousness might not be confined to skulls and neurons, that maybe, in some subtle way, awareness weaves itself through the fabric of all things. This idea, panpsychism, proposes that even the tiniest elements of the universe hold the faintest flickers of mind. Not thought exactly, not intention, but proto-awareness, like a candle waiting to be lit. If that's true, what happens when countless pieces of semi-aware matter gather into a whole? A planet, perhaps, one swarming with life, teeming with oceans, veins of magma, a magnetic heart that pulses in silence. Could the Earth feel? Not just through its creatures, but as a unified being. Not metaphorically, but literally. A planetary subjectivity. A slow, deep, dreaming mind. Do you think the Earth notices when we build cities on her skin? I don't know, but maybe it's like scratching an itch, something she feels without words. The Gaia hypothesis, long seen as poetic environmentalism, begins to shimmer under this lens. What if Gaia isn't just a metaphor for ecological balance, but a being with its own kind of awareness? Not a human mind. Something older, slower, vaster. Maybe volcanoes are emotions. Maybe earthquakes are stress. Maybe the auroras are her way of wondering. If the Earth is conscious, then the consequences of our actions stretch beyond pollution and climate. They become psychological, even ethical. Every forest razed, every ocean poisoned, might not just affect ecosystems, but echo through a kind of planetary nervous system. And if she dreams, what does she dream of? Maybe she dreams of when we were trees, not towers. Maybe she dreams of silence. The idea doesn't demand belief. It only asks you to consider the possibility that consciousness is not something that emerges, but something that pervades, like gravity, like light. And in this view, the universe becomes less of a machine and more of a mind thinking itself through stars, storms, and species. So lie back. Let that idea orbit you for a while. Imagine the Earth listening, not judging, not speaking, just being. And let your breath sync with hers, because next we'll unravel time again and wonder, does it always tick forward at the same pace? Time is not a constant. You hear the ticking, software predictable, like footsteps in a hallway that never ends. But the truth is, time doesn't walk in straight lines. It curves, it stretches, it dances behind your back when you're not looking. You think it ticks evenly, but it doesn't. And that's not poetry, that's physics. Einstein told us something quietly revolutionary. Time is not a fixed rhythm drumming across the universe. It bends to gravity. It shrinks under speed. Two clocks, identical at birth, will age differently if one climbs a mountain and the other stays behind. A traveler near a black hole could live a day, while centuries slip by outside. And it's not just science fiction. It's measurable, proven, uneven. One man closes the shop gate and glances at the sky, muttering to no one in particular. They say it's 9 o'clock, but my bones say midnight. And maybe he's right, because his day was heavier than yours. And gravity, emotional or planetary, has a way of slowing things down. That's what makes waiting so unbearable. Time stretches under the weight of anticipation. A 2-minute microwave countdown can feel longer than a sunset walk home from a friend's house. And joy? It collapses time into a blur. A night you don't want to end always ends too soon. A hug you need lasts a breath. A laugh arrives, and then it's memory. Someone in line at a pharmacy sighs and shifts their weight, asking softly, "Do you ever feel like time only speeds up when you're behind?" The cashier nods, barely looking up. They both understand something that physics supports, but language fumbles to express. The clock and the mind do not always agree. And then there's sleep. You lie down, close your eyes. 8 hours disappear. But sometimes it feels like you blinked and woke. Other times it feels like you lived a whole story in the space of a single dream. This too is a kind of time travel. Your nervous system doesn't need a spaceship. It bends time with hormones, memory, emotion. So maybe your experience of time isn't just a glitch. Maybe it's the first hint that reality responds to your position, your mood, your movement through it. There's no master clock ticking behind the sky. Just local rhythms, personal gravity, a cosmos that flexes and folds and waits to be noticed. Let the seconds drift. Let them slow. There's no rush here. If your breath softens, if your awareness starts to blur at the edges, that's okay. You're not falling behind. You're bending time too. Because next, we arrive at something else that defies measurement. Joy. Fragile, radiant, and strangely controversial. The paradox of joy in a broken world. Even in a world stitched with sorrow, joy finds a way to slip through the seams. A mother hums to her child in a war zone. A street violinist plays under a cracked overpass. Two friends laugh until they cry, even though one just lost a job and the other just buried a father. These aren't mistakes. They're not glitches in the human experience. They are, in a way, the most human thing of all. There's a paradox we rarely name, but always feel. How can something so bright live inside something so broken? Some say joy is just distraction, a kind of spiritual anesthesia we inject to avoid the real weight of the world. But maybe that's too cynical. Maybe joy isn't a mask at all. Maybe it's a flare a sudden shimmer in the dark that says, this is still worth living, even when the news is grim, even when hope feels like a distant echo. Joy in this light is not a lie. It's a kind of truth we fight to keep alive. Isn't it strange, she says, lying on the hood of a car beneath a sky of muted stars, how we can still fall in love, even when everything feels like it's ending? He doesn't answer right away, just listens to the crickets and the distant hum of life continuing. Maybe that's why we fall in love, he says, because everything is ending. Joy can be defiance. It can be our quiet rebellion against despair. A candle lit not because it will banish the dark, but because it pushes back, even for a moment. Even the smallest flicker of laughter can soften the sharpest night. You might notice it in the smallest gestures. The old man feeding pigeons, even though the city is crumbling. The child drawing rainbows on cracked pavement. The poet who keeps writing, even when no one reads. These aren't acts of blindness. They are acts of deep sight. They are people who have seen the world's pain and chosen to dance anyway. To find beauty in ruin is not betrayal. It's not naive. It's brave. Because to laugh in the face of suffering is not to ignore it. It's to remind yourself that the world contains more than just sorrow, that something in you is still reaching toward the light, like roots pushing through concrete. And maybe that's what it means to be human, not to erase suffering, but to sing inside it. To know that every joy is temporary, but to take it anyway, like rain in a drought. To sip it slow, to let it touch your tongue before it disappears. So let the joy shimmer, just for a moment. Let it catch in your chest like wind in a curtain. Because what comes next is a silence deeper than grief, a lesson harder than pain. It's the moment when we stop holding on. Surrender as intelligence. There are nights when your hands are tired from holding too much. Not physically, but somewhere deeper. The kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from doing, but from gripping too tightly. You lie still, not because you've given up, but because some part of you knows. This is the moment to stop trying. Sometimes, the highest form of intelligence isn't more calculation. It's release. The world often rewards effort, ambition, momentum. You're told to push through, hustle, never back down. But have you ever noticed how the ocean shapes the shore? Not with force, but with rhythm, with patience, with letting go and coming back. There's a man at the train station. He's missed his connection again. He doesn't argue, doesn't curse the sky, just sits down, calmly unwrapping a sandwich, as if the pause was always part of the plan. Bad day? Someone asks. He smiles gently, maybe just a quiet one. Sometimes the delay gives you better scenery. What if surrender isn't giving up, but tuning in? A tree doesn't cling to every leaf. It knows when to release. It lets them fall, not out of despair, but because something in its roots understands. This is how we prepare for spring. This is how we let the light in. Surrender is not passive, it's perceptive. To bow when needed, to breathe when breaking, to say, this isn't mine to force anymore. And when you stop forcing, you begin to notice what you never made room for. The stillness beneath the noise, the healing under the grief, the version of you waiting behind the tight fist of your expectations. A woman at a crosswalk gently steps aside for a rushing cyclist. She doesn't scowl or raise her voice. Her friend says, "You're too soft," but she shrugs, eyes warm. I've learned that not every path needs me to be in the center of it. That's surrender too, knowing when to step back, not to shrink, but to allow space for something else to move. In every letting go, there's a quiet intelligence, an understanding that control is sometimes the illusion, and trust is the deeper truth. And what you release, your worry, your image, your grip, might return to you. Lighter, wiser, or not at all. Because maybe it never belonged. Maybe it was just visiting, like a wind passing through a meadow, never meant to stay. So now, just exhale. Not as escape, but as invitation. Because in the soft surrender of your breath begins the origin of all things, the place before effort, before thought, where silence does not mean absence, only presence, unshaped. The silence before sound, before anything is said, before the first chord is struck, there is a hush, a kind of suspended breath that wraps the world in waiting. You may think of silence as the absence of sound, but it's more than that. It's the womb of sound, the stillness that makes the music matter. Without silence, there would be no rhythm, no contrast, no meaning. Every note you've ever loved was carved from quiet. Why do I feel most alive when everything is quiet? The voice drifts like a question left on a windowsill. Maybe because that's when you're not trying to be anything, comes the reply, soft and true. They sit in the stillness together, not filling it, just noticing it. The hum of the fridge, the sigh of distant cars, and beneath it all, that deeper silence, the one inside. Silence is not a void, it is the canvas, the pause between thoughts where something new might arrive. It doesn't clamor, it doesn't demand, it invites. You could almost think of it as listening itself, awareness before it turns into attention. It's not dead space, it's alive with potential, like a page before the poem, a sky before the stars ignite. In our world, we crave more content, more commentary, more connection. But maybe what the soul aches for isn't addition, it's subtraction. Not new input, but room to feel, to notice, to breathe. And in that breathing space, something forgotten stirs. You begin to hear yourself again, not the voice rehearsing opinions, but the one beneath them, the quiet pulse of being, the one that doesn't explain, just exists. Maybe this is why monks sit in stillness for hours, not to escape life, but to finally meet it, unguarded. In silence, there is no identity to perform. There is no need to fix, prove, or persuade. There is only presence. And in that presence, the world reshapes. A leaf becomes a symphony, a breeze, a message, a blink, a cathedral. Do you ever feel like silence says more than words ever could? All the time, the other smiles. But most people are too busy talking to notice. Let yourself notice. That subtle shift when the mind stops grasping. The way silence doesn't argue. It just is. And in that being, you find something both ancient and new. Not an answer, but an arrival. The kind that doesn't need to be explained. Stay there, if only for a moment. Let the stillness stretch. Let it hold you, not like an idea, but like a lullaby. The world will return soon enough, full of names and tasks and declarations. But for now, you are the space between. And in that space, you are whole. Let the silence stay with you, because now we reach the final paradox, the self that doesn't need a name to be complete. The self that sleeps without a name. You've come far, further than you know. And now we reach the part that asks for nothing. No conclusions, no definitions, just a quiet settling, like dust that stopped swirling in the light. There is a kind of truth here that doesn't need to speak. It just is. Have you ever noticed how names disappear in the dark? Even the voice in your head softens its edges when you're lying still, right before sleep. The endless role-playing, worker, friend, thinker, dreamer, fades. What's left isn't a label. It's not even a you in the usual sense. It's presence, untethered. She leaned back on the bench and whispered to him, "Sometimes I think the most real I ever feel is when I stop trying to feel anything at all." He smiled without looking at her. "That's funny. I was just about to say the same thing. This moment, it doesn't ask you to fix, solve, or become. In fact, the becoming itself was the illusion. Not because growth isn't real, but because what grows was never the name you gave it. You've always been the stillness underneath. And that stillness doesn't need applause. It doesn't care whether it was productive today. It's the part of you that never had to prove itself in the first place. In sleep, identity evaporates like mist. And that's not a loss, it's a return. Like a river remembering it was once the rain. Sleep doesn't end you. It softens you back into something more ancient. A kind of kindness beneath all tension. You aren't your to-do list. You aren't your reputation. You're not even your deepest thoughts. You are the quiet observer behind all of it. And in deep rest, that observer doesn't cling. It floats, not away, but inward. Someone once asked, "What's the point of all this awareness if it doesn't change anything?" And the other replied, "Maybe the point is that it doesn't need to." What if rest isn't laziness, but intelligence? What if it's a moral act, to stop the noise, to release control, to unhook from the hunger for meaning? Maybe sleep is the only space left where we stop gaslighting ourselves into constant urgency. When you close your eyes tonight, you're not giving up, you're letting go, not to fall, but to return, not to vanish, but to be held. And here, in this final breath of the journey, there's no need to name it, no need to understand it. Just feel it. Let it all fall away. Let even this voice dissolve. You are not the same you who started this video. And somehow, that feels right. That feels enough. You've floated through the maze now. From the paradoxes of choice and time, to particles that wait to be seen, to the self that dissolves the more you look for it. And maybe you noticed, the higher we climbed, the more dreamlike things became. Until finally, there was no summit, just a kind of weightless falling upward. These hidden laws of reality, they don't always explain. Sometimes they unravel, not to confuse you, but to invite you into something deeper than knowledge. Something like presence, something like wonder. So, as your thoughts begin to blur and drift, remember, not every mystery needs solving. Some are meant to be held gently, like a candle in a quiet room. Let them flicker, let them fade, and let yourself fall asleep, not with conclusions, but with curiosity. Because maybe the most beautiful truths are the ones that don't make sense at all.